I will now call to order the regular council meeting of the town of St. Andrews on Monday, March 1st, 2021 at 7 p.m. The recording of attendance, I note that all members of council are in attendance, in addition to our Chief Administrative Officer, Chris Spear, and our clerk and Senior Administrator, Paul Knopper. And I would assume that along the way in this meeting, we will have members of our planning staff related from the Southwest Regional Service Commission.
Your
The
worship,
approval of the agenda, I will look for a motion to approve the agenda.
Also move.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop, and a seconder.
I'll second Councillor Michelle.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Grew.
Thank you, Your
And,
Worship. I think that perhaps Mr. Knopf, I had a conversation with Mr. Knopper. There may be some changes to the agenda. That
Yeah,
might
I
be
think
forthcoming.
that Deputy Mayor Henderson was planning on making an amendment.
Correct.
Is,
Yeah, through you, your worship, if council would entertain it, I'd like to add a motion that council supports the town pursuing development opportunities on land located behind the NBCC St. Andrews campus for affordable housing.
okay, thank you, Council. That sounds like that's just, we'll add that to new business. Deputy Mayor, does that seem appropriate to Council?
Is that an F5, Your Worship?
Yeah, yes.
I'd second the F5.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Michelle. All right, we will add that to the agenda. So now I will look for a motion to approve the
worship,
agenda.
Councillor Grew.
Your Worship,
Councilor Grew, yes.
just a point of order, and perhaps Mr. Knopper can jump in. I think that items number 4 and 5 are to be deleted from the agenda. Is that correct, Mr. Knopper?
Your worship, we would like to leave them on the agenda just to have them as a talking piece, but we can discuss tabling any motion or removal of any motion from at that point.
Okay, thank you,
We want,
Mr. Knopper.
your worship, we want to just address it accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
That's fine.
Great. Okay, good. So now we'll go back and look for a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll move, your worship.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And the seconder for that,
I'll second.
Councilor Goumi, thank you. All in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the amended agenda is approved. I will now look to disclosure of conflict of interest in relation to any matter before council tonight.
Your worship,
Yes,
I'd like to declare a conflict of interest on FA 210014 AB.
okay, I will expect you to just deal with that at the time when it arises. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
And I think that's the same one I've been in conflict on too.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Harrison, again, when the time comes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Your Worship, I'd like to declare a conflict on RCS 210204. That's the Katie's Cove Letter of Support. Since I'm the president of Katie's Cove Incorporated, it doesn't seem appropriate that I should participate in that item.
Understood, Councilor Grew. Thank you. All right. We'll move on. We have no presentations at this meeting, but we have a lot of minutes to approve from the previous month. I think there are 8 sets of minutes that need to be approved, so we'll get through that. So I will first go to the minutes of the regular meeting of council on February the 1st, 2021. And I'll look for a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll move that.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop, and a seconder.
I'll second.
Thank you. Counselor Harrison. If there aren't any questions, all in favor of approving the minutes as written, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. We will now move to the minutes of the special meeting of council, which took place on February 1st, 2021. I'll look for a motion to approve those minutes.
Remove.
Counselor Groove, thank you. And a seconder?
So move.
Yeah, Counselor Akaji, thank you. If there are no questions, all in favor of approving those minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, those minutes are also approved. Then we will move to the minutes of the public consultation session on February the 8th, 2021. I'll look for a motion to approve those minutes.
Worship,
Councilor Gumichel, thank you.
if I may make a comment, your worship.
Certainly.
It seems there's been quite a significant change to the manner in which we're taking minutes. These minutes are 7 or 8 pages long and seem to be word for word. That's not how we've been taking minutes in the past. Usually we would have minutes are a summary of what was said, not a word for word, particularly when some things are recorded in here may or may not be factual.
Well, Councilor Gumichel, I think that's more of a procedural issue that we should discuss if you have a problem with anything that's in the minutes. But if you have a particular problem with something that's in a minute that's inaccurate, then we can deal with that as a change to the minute. Not quite sure what the.
Through your worship, it was, for me, it's more the next minutes, and I could discuss it then, but just it's relevant to Councillor Gumichel's comments is when you get into the minutes of the hearing of objections, it is word for word what people said. They give reference to people in the community that weren't at the meeting. They may not want their name in the minutes. They give reference to businesses that may not want their business in it. And they also, I wasn't at that meeting, but they also make assumptions and comments that, in particular, this one is that members of council are giving short-term rental permits to family members, and that's in the minutes. And I don't think that, again, I wasn't at the meeting, but I don't think that that's acceptable to be put in writing, something that has no fact or basis for such allegations other than they are trying to discredit members of council as part of the decision-making process. So I do concur with Councillor Gumichel. I appreciate the extra detail that we're getting on the minutes, but there's a certain line that I think, especially in that hearing of objections, that's crossed.
Your worship, just a quick point of order, though. Councillor Gumichel already moved that set of minutes. We should have a seconder before we forget where we're at, and then we can continue the discussion on that.
All right, I must
piece.
have jumped ahead a set there. Sorry about that.
Problem, Councilor Gumichel. Let's deal with the minutes that are okay, and then we'll go on to the controversial set of minutes. Okay, I need a seconder for the motion for the minutes of the, is that the public consultation?
210208, your worship.
I'll second that, your worship.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of approval of those minutes, then please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Then those minutes are passed. Now we'll move on to the minutes of the public hearing of objections on February the 8th, 2021. And I'll look for a motion to approve those minutes.
Also move.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bishop, and the seconder, Councillor Groove. Now, we comments in relation to those minutes.
Your worship, if I may, I'd just like to make a motion to table those minutes and have them rewritten with some of that stuff removed from it, and then revisit those minutes at a later meeting to accept them.
Okay,
Your worship, I would just like to add that these are minutes of what was said, not edited versions of it. is that all we're doing is saying, okay, this is what was said at the meeting. We're not admitting that they're factual. We're not making any, we're just saying, yes, this was said. We don't think, we're not saying that the items that were said were factual. I think we're just reiterating what was said at the meeting. And I think we have to be accurate in portraying what was said if we're going to have minutes. We can't be redacting and editing and putting in whatever we want to see. It's what was said at the meeting, and those statements, whether they're true or not, were stated.
Through your worship, we've been approving minutes for a number of years without that level of detail in it. I myself am not comfortable approving minutes. I know I wasn't at that meeting where somebody is attacking the credibility of fellow counselors. It's something that we should have zero tolerance against. Technically, it goes against our code of conduct policy. I myself will not be voting in favor of any minutes that with no warrant or credibility attacks the integrity of counselors simply for the fact that they want to actually, they want to influence decision-making, be aggressive. There's no place for it. And that's the reason why when elections happen, we have acclamations, because, we've got to stand up for ourselves. And this is a positive way we can do it, to say, you can't attack counselors. You can talk about the issue at hand, but when you make comments with no warrant behind it, it doesn't deserve to be on paper. And that's just my thoughts.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I think we need to table these minutes and reconsider them. I think the issue is broader than, I tend to agree with both the Deputy Mayor and with Councillor Grew that what is said is what is said, but in fact, whether what is said is appropriate and should be dealt with in another way is another question. So I will leave the motion as is to not proceed with those minutes at this point and to table them at this point in time. And we'll bring them back and we'll have a further discussion of this matter.
Your worship, you had Deputy Mayor Henderson motion it. You need a seconder and to approve tabling.
Okay. Seconder to table the minutes for now.
Councillor Gumichel, your worship.
Councillor Gumichel, thank you. All in favor of tabling the minutes for now, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Councillor Grew, taking your noted. Those minutes are tabled. Now we'll move to the minutes of the public consultation session on February the 17th, 2021. Have a motion to approve those minutes, please.
I'll move, your worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And the seconder?
I'll second it, your worship.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ackerby. Okay, any questions on those minutes? If not, all in favor of approving them, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. Now we'll move to the minutes of the special meeting of council on February 17th, 2021. Look for a motion to approve those minutes.
Also move.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bishop, and a seconder.
Councillor Grew, your worship.
Councillor Brew, thank you. And any comments? If not, all in favor of the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. Now we'll move to the minutes of the special meeting of council on February 22nd, 2021. Look for a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Councillor Gumichel.
Thank you, Councillor Gumichel. And a seconder.
I'll second it.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Bishop. All in favor of approving those minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, those minutes are also approved. Finally, we'll move to the minutes of the Committee of Council meeting of February 22nd, 2021. I'll need a motion to approve those minutes.
Councillor Drew, your worship.
Councillor Groot.
Councillor Groove, thank you. And a seconder,
I'll second it.
Councillor Bishop, thank you. All in favor of approving those minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, those minutes are also approved. Thank you, Council. We will now move to.
Your worship, just a general, just if I may, Councillor Gumashall, through you. Just a general comment is that the minutes have significantly changed further to the earlier conversation. I mean, the level of detail that are in the minutes must represent a significant increase in the amount of work for staff. I've been on a number of boards and I've never seen this level of detail in the minutes, like whether it was Sunbury Shores or the Kiwanis Club or MB Trails. I've never seen such detailed minutes, and I'm not sure what the purposes of that. I thought minutes were to summarize meetings, not to play it back on record. So it's just a general comment. I do appreciate staff's done a lot of work. I just think that some summation is needed so that we don't have to spend half an hour improving the minutes at the beginning of each meeting. Thank you, Worship.
Councilor Gumashall, as I indicated before, perhaps this is something that council should bring forward and discuss amongst itself at a meeting in terms of whether or not we want to alter our procedural bylaw in any way to change the minutes, or we'll have that discussion with staff prior to the next meeting. Thank you. Okay. Move now to communications, and tonight we actually have a couple of communications that I will read. The first one is a request to deal with the renaming of the commons outside of the courthouse. The communication is as follows. To whom it may concern, we are writing to propose that the green space informally known as the courtyard on Frederick Street between Parr and Montague be named Goodale Common in honor and in memory of the late George Goodale. George was a wonderful neighbor, a pillar of the community, and a local treasure whose legacy endures in the hearts and minds of many residents of St. Andrews by the Sea. To those who did not have the pleasure or privilege of knowing George, we offer the following rationale to support our proposal. George moved to St. Andrews from St. George in 1929 after his father, Levi Goodale, was hired on as the jailer of what is now known as the Old Jail. In his childhood, George lived with his father and his mother, Jane, and his siblings, Joe and Annie, in a small apartment attached to the back of the jail. Levi passed away in 1941, at which point George became the jailer. It was also in this year that George and his surviving family members moved into 112 Frederick Street, the home that George would occupy until his passing in 2010. George held the position of jailer at the Old Jail from 1941 to 1953. A physical limitation prevented him from serving in World War II. He struggled to resolve his guilt over this his entire life. Instead, George remained in St. Andrews and served his community by forging strong, meaningful relationships with others and by investing his own time and effort for the betterment of the town. Over the years, George became a highly respected citizen through his devotion to the Catholic Church community, his years of commitment as a hockey referee, and his incredible dedication and commitment to the volunteer fire department, where he served for over 50 years. With the exception of a few years when she was away studying and practicing as a nurse, George's sister Annie lived with him at 112 Frederick Street until she passed away in 2002. George and Annie were considered the neighborhood grandparents by a large group of children who grew up on or around Frederick Street in the 1990s. The courtyard was really at the heart of these special relationships. It was a place for the neighborhood kids to gather and play, and George and Annie's house was a place to go afterwards to share tales of adventure after long afternoons in the fresh air. Their door was always open for an after-school snack, an after-supper game of cribbage, a Band-Aid for a hard-earned scrape, and a caring listening ear at any time. George never married, but this did not stop him from growing a large community of friends and neighbors who considered and still consider him family. In addition to glowing childhood memories and a lasting tradition of neighborship, part of George's enduring legacy in the town of St. Andrews exists in the form of a considerable gift of documents, resources, and artifacts that he bequeathed to the Charlotte County Archives when he passed. George's donation, now housed in the very building where he first lived when he arrived on Frederick Street in 1929, is of significant historical value and is a priceless contribution to the narrative history and heritage of St. Andrews. As the last major green space within the town plat, the courtyard on Frederick Street must be protected for the benefit and enjoyment of all residents for years to come. Harry Mallory Field and Ken Langmaid Park are named for individuals who made extraordinary contributions to the town of St. Andrews. And we believe the courtyard presents another opportunity to do the same. In this particular case, there is a unique opportunity to name for George the very land to which he was so physically and emotionally connected over his entire lifespan. George lived on Frederick Street, either beside or across from the courtyard for 81 years. His legacy is honored with every child out sliding on the hill, every group gathering to play softball or frisbee, every birthday celebrated on the grass, every evening of flashlight tag, every young explorer tramping through the trees, every family picnic. Every moment spent in that space connected to nature, to each other, and to the heritage of our beautiful town honors George's memory. We propose that the courtyard be named Goodale Common in memory of our friend, neighbor, and beloved St. Andrews community member, George Goodale. Thank you for your consideration. Alan Dunfield, February 11th, 2021. Move on to the second piece of correspondence, and this is from the Age Friendly Advisory Committee of the town of St. Andrews. And it is addressed to Mr. Spear, the Chief Administrative Officer, and it is the Age Friendly Advisory recommendations dated March 2021. On behalf of the Age Friendly Advisory Committee, we would like to congratulate the town, its mayor, councilors, and employees for the commitment you have shown to the AFC initiative over the past 12 months. Together, along with a number of individuals, community groups, and the AFC Advisory Committee, we have accomplished many of the goals set out in the AFC Action Plan. We look forward to working with you, the old and new councils, as we pursue our mutual AFC goals in the months and years ahead. As you know, our committee consists of two co-chairs, Leslie LeBlanc and Carolyn Davies, a recording secretary, Jacqueline Muir, as well as Sue Corbin, Louise McFarland, and Sandy Morgan. Our mandate states the Age Friendly Advisory Committee is to advise and support the town of St. Andrews as they continue to implement the Age Friendly Action Plan adopted by Council in 2018. In review, the following are just a few of the initiatives that have come to be or soon will be completed. Completion of St. Andrews New Wellness Center. The Community Resource Guide for residents of St. Andrews and area has been researched, written, and distributed to the households of St. Andrews. We have recently learned funding has been made available, allowing the printing of additional guides and emergency medical alert sheets. They will be mailed to all of the residents on the peninsula. The emergency numbers fridge magnet, along with emergency medical alert information sheets with an instruction leaflet, have been distributed to residents of St. Andrews. Benches have been purchased and placed along the walking trails. A pocket park has been built at the end of Elizabeth Street overlooking the water. There has been extensive communication with the community regarding the resource guide, fridge magnet, and the emergency medical alert information sheet through CHCO, TV, radio stations, newspaper articles, and posters in high traffic areas. A hop-on, hop-off bus has been purchased by Kingsburg. Working with the Huntsman Marine Science Center to develop multi-generational programs at the center, possibly beginning with a walking program. Municipal plan and secondary plan passed, zoning bylaws, regrading housing types ongoing. Universal design has been incorporated into any new building construction in town. More parking for handicapped users have been designated in town. Pilot project regarding Water Street being one way during the tourist season carried out in 2020. Paving of more sidewalks ongoing. Porta potties used during the summer months throughout the town. Staff looking at alternative washrooms for the upcoming season. Town working with Coastal Link Trail and SORTI on trail mapping and continued development. Town and the AFC Advisory Committee have applied for grant monies through New Horizon for Seniors to establish a community kitchen in the area. To maintain our AFC designation, the town needs to continue to follow through with the items outlined within the St. Andrews AFC Action Plan and report same to the province. The designation is reviewed every 2 years by the province. We are confident that when the review is conducted later this year, the province will be impressed by what we have already accomplished. However, the action plan tells us that there is much more to be completed as we work towards being an age-friendly community of which we can be proud. As a committee, we will continue to work on initiatives, recommendations, and seek funding where available to meet these goals. Our committee would like to recommend to the town of St. Andrews of our project recommendations for the consideration for the upcoming year. We understand that the town has allocated $10,000 towards AFC initiatives during the fiscal year. We would appreciate being informed on the projects upon which the monies will be spent. Number one, conduct a housing needs survey within St. Andrews and throughout the entire peninsula. 2, have more bicycle racks built and placed within the town. These might be placed at Market Square at the beginning of the trail system opposite Langmaid Park and the Blockhouse and Lighthouse. The number of racks will be dependent on their cost. Purchase 20 at a minimum pedometers to be used by the participants of the walking program at the Huntsman Marine Science Center. 4, the remainder of the monies might go towards the community kitchen planned for the W.C. O'Neill Arena or equipment needed to the new wellness center's fitness physiotherapy area. The AFC Advisory Committee knows that affordable intergenerational housing is one of the most urgent needs facing people of St. Andrews and area. We encourage those who plan to run in the upcoming municipal election to make this a priority and part of your election platform. We would like to thank the town of St. Andrews for your continued support of our initiatives. Respectfully submitted, Leslie LeBlanc, co-chair, AFC Advisory Committee. Okay, thank you, Councilor. And I will now to staff reports. And I will ask the CAO to read his report for the month. Spirit.
Thank you, Worship. Happy March 1st, Council. With the majority of the winter behind us, we are all looking forward to the return of warmer weather and the activities of spring. Council is continuing to be proactive in the last few months of their mandate, despite being in the 5th year of their service to the community. After several months and 2 recent public consultation meetings, Council should be ready to provide staff direction on the preferred design of the Wharf refurbishment project. I am happy to announce we have been approved by the funding request from the Regional Development Corporation with total funding of $4.172 million on a total project of $5,006,500. We are aware of community interest in participation moving forward, including an environmental impact assessment that will likely be required. Before Council tonight is the second reading for the updated zoning bylaw Z2101. Under the Community Planning Act, Council needs to make the zoning bylaw within 1 year of the adaptation of the municipal plan, which occurred on December 16th, 2020. Due to the volume and complexity of this bylaw, I encourage Council to see this through to their 3rd reading before the municipal elections in May. Staff can schedule additional meetings to discuss any further amendments and, if need be, community consultation. The introduction of the short-term rental bylaw created tremendous feedback from the community, for which council is grateful. Consequently, staff has been asked to simplify the document that went through first reading and provide it to council for further deliberation. We will be providing the next draft to you by mid-March, and upon further review and direction from council, we would release the bylaw to the public. On the agenda tonight is a rezone application for the old medical center at 108 Sophia Street. Two established veterinarians want to create a practice at that location. Although staff was surprised by the offer and application, we support the rezoning as it appears similar to the medical practice that was there before in terms of traffic, hours of operation, and impact on the neighborhood. The applicants have agreed to no outdoor kenneling and to maintain the architectural heritage of the building. Since the retirement of the local vet a few years ago, this returning service to the community should be appreciated by the multiple cat and dog owners within the town. Plug to pick up your dog tags soon, folks. On February 22nd, council was provided with a detailed report on potential options for enhancing the active transportation infrastructure in St. Andrews. We are being considered for COVID-19 related funding towards recreational improvements that would allow us to invest up to 1.5 million into our trail network. Council will be reviewing the various options and providing staff with direction for segments this year. An exciting initiative on the agenda tonight is a request by SORTI to install an outdoor fitness recreation park for all ages to promote healthy living and an active lifestyle. The full realization of it is contingent on the use of town property and successful funding from New Horizon for seniors, which they have been successful in getting in the past and are hopeful to get it again this year. Finally, Casey's Coves Inc. is looking for a letter of support from council regarding their ongoing revitalization of that facility. They are working closely with the Algonquin Resort for the use of the land and achieving charity status that allow them to collect more funds and issue receipts for donations. Administration. Council has been supporting staff as we update our human resource policies and procedures. Senior staff is grateful for this initiative to formalize the policies with staff and establish a rigid review and salary range for all permanent municipal staff. It has been a busy month for presentations for senior staff, as we have put together 3 public presentations enabling council to get community input into your initiatives. Even though these may take only 20 to 30 minutes to present, preparation time can be several hours to a day. We appreciate how important and avenue this is to provide information to the public to receive their feedback towards projects and bylaws. The asset manager and I met with the engineering team at CBCL to plan the upcoming capital projects this spring. As always, we strive to complete these projects outside the busy tourist season of June through August. Currently, we are in the design phase, but expect to be going to tender within a couple to 3 weeks. Either in late March or early April, we will bring forward motions to award successful bidders on these projects. These projects were approved by council in the 2021 budget process and include asphalting, in-ground infrastructure work, and rehabilitation of the steel reservoir. We have not started the design of either the wharf or potential trails within the town. The assistant treasurer has been busy preparing for the 2020 audit that should take place the 3rd week of March. We are pushing the auditors to have financial statements completed in time for the last meeting of this council in May, and feel strongly we are in line to do that. Staff also prepared applications for the Municipal Capital Borrowing Board this month, which will go to a meeting on March 18th. Most of the funding this year is identified for the utility fund and your ongoing investment to bring the infrastructure up to date. This year was the primary projects are a block of, this year, the primary projects are a block of Sophia Street and at the head of King Street. I would like to inform council that I've been appointed as one of 3 members of the Association of Municipal Administrators to be on the larger steering committee regarding local government reform as be requested by Mr. Allet. I am excited to be representing not only St. Andrew's needs, but as a voice for towns and villages throughout New Brunswick. Council, please note that we had 8 meetings of council in February and that the current council package is in excess of 350 pages. To make the process more efficient, staff have been implementing an electronic meeting management system, which we plan on reintroducing this with the next council. In addition to making the package creation process easier, it will also allow council to go online and review outstanding issues and related documentation. The savings in photocopier charges and paper will pay the annual licensing fee for this product. Mr. Knopper also has been busy completing multiple grant applications and meeting with community groups by acting as the liaison between council and the organizations. We've had a soft opening of the new wellness center since January as we work through the challenges of working in a new space and the multiple unforeseen but relatively small issues that come up. I wish to express appreciation to Terry Acton and the Public Works crew for helping the users to bring the space to the point where they can move forward with minimal interruption of their services. Senior staff have been working collaboratively on various projects and funding applications as we look at alternatives and recommendations that we can bring to council. We have a strong team that brings many different ideas for consideration and executions after direction. The bylaw enforcement officer has been busy over the winter, keeping an eye on parking issues, including the winter ban and overnight street parking, following up on animal control issues with a dog owner, and investigating illegal deer feeding. He took the time to remind snowplow operators that moving snow from private driveways cannot be put into the roadway or across the street on the shoulder. The utility department staff have been busy with ongoing maintenance. The work being completed at the water treatment plant is expected as it is now in its 16th year of service, and many of the components were due to be refurnished or replaced. Safety is always the key aspect when dealing with potable water, so any investment here are critically important. In addition to the regular duties, they completed the annual wastewater and water reports for the Department of Environment. They reviewed new regulation and reporting requirements being implemented by the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans regarding overflows from our sanitary sewer system. Municipal water and wastewater systems are highly regulated activities that require constant upgrading of staff skills and constant communication with the regulatory bodies. In conclusion, it has been a busy winter as council has finalized their priority items going into the spring elections. You've taken on significant pieces of legislation while including public consultation and committing a significant amount of your time in the execution of your duties. Staff appreciate the cooperation, input, and open dialogue we've had with you. Respectfully submitted, Chris Spear, Chief Administrative Officer. My apologies, Your Worship. I had a hard time talking through that last one.
Thank you, Mr. Spear, and congratulations on your appointment to that committee. That's a very important step, I believe, for us to finally have a dedicated minister of local government and local government reform who is putting in place a process we hope to move forward with local government reform. So good luck on all of that.
Your Worship, if I could just add something, again, congratulations to Mr. Spear. And I noticed in his report that our package today was over 350 pages. And there is a certain benefit to moving to electronic meeting management. But at the same time, I think, I know when we first tried it out, I recall when I looked at my iPad and there was 20 icons I had to sift through in order to go through the meeting. It was just so unwieldy that it didn't really work that well for us. Hopefully for the next council, as we develop this electronic meeting management system, it'll be easier to use and user-friendly for the councillors. Because I know that the old system that we tried before was very difficult to manage and use for councillors.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Grew. I appreciate your comments on that. I was feeling kind of the same way under the old system, but it becomes even more complex because we're trying to look at each other on Zoom, and I don't know how that's, when we get back to face-to-face meetings, I think we have a chance with a good system of going that way, but I think it'd be tough tonight to be having both things on the go at the same time and being able to see people on Zoom. So
Yeah.
I hear your pain, Councillor Groove. Okay, look, council has had the opportunity to look at all of the staff reports, and I will now look for a motion to approve the staff reports.
Also move.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop, and seconded by Councillor Groove. All in favor of approving the staff reports, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Hearing none. The staff reports are approved. We will now move to introduction, consideration, and passing of bylaws and motions. And I will turn it over to Councillor Bishop for the finance and administration motion.
Thank you, Mayor. FA 20210104 A and B, dated February 17th, 21. The subject, amendment number 1 to bylaw number 75, regulating licensing of peddlers and transient traders, first reading. The background. In December of 2020, Council provided support to the temporary use request for 182 Water Street for 2021. To ensure the temporary use conforms to town bylaws, an amendment to bylaw 75 regulating licensing of peddlers and transient traders needs to occur. The draft amendment provided with this report has been reviewed by the municipal lawyer and the planners at the Southwest New Brunswick Regional Service Commission. The amendment highlights a change to the definition of temporary business with a focus of approval needed either via PAC or PRAC. Staff believe this amendment change will allow for the temporary use to occur at 182 Water Street and will ensure the spirit of the bylaw is preserved. The first motion, FA 210104A, that council grant leave for first reading of amendment number 1 of bylaw number 75 regulating licensing of peddlers and transient traders.
Councillor Bishop, I'll look for a seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Groove, thank you. Discussion, council.
Councillor Groove, your worship.
Councillor Groove.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple of comments on this one. First off, thank you for making the changes. I had previously suggested some changes to add clarity to the bylaw, and some of those changes have been made, so thank you for that. I'd like to say we're still not quite there yet. And I'd like to suggest a few minor wordsmithing changes to get us there. And one of the problems I see with this is that you have town council recommending. I would suggest that the wording is very, how would I say, very wordy when it comes to the Planning Review and Adjustments Committee. So what I would suggest is, and I crafted a bit of wording here, is a definition of an exempt temporary business means a business that has been approved by the Town of St. Andrews Council and granted a temporary use by the Advisory Committee of the Town of St. Andrews under the authority of Section 53(2)(1) of the Community Planning Act. And then carry that forward in the second part. And again, a person can operate an exempt temporary business for a period of up to 1 year within the municipality if it has been approved by the Town of St. Andrews Council and granted a temporary use by the Advisory Committee of the Town of St. Andrews. And I think that makes it a lot clearer, and it puts the council of the Town of St. Andrews in the approval business and in the driver's seat on this issue, not making recommendations. because I viewed this and I saw this and it was more, the council is recommending to the PAC, where I think the council should be approving, not recommending. And then the third point I have is that even with this change, if you look at the definitions in the bylaw, the temporary business definition still poses a problem because any truck or trailer is defined as a temporary business. So that needs to be reworked as we move to second reading. And we need to look at that a bit further. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Grew, I understand what you're saying. I don't see those as minor wordsmithing changes. I see that as a fundamental change. And I think we ended up in this situation, which I tend to agree with you. I don't like this wording either, but it's the wording that we're told we have to use because it's the wording of the Community Planning Act and the local.
This is not the wording of the Community Planning Act, Your Worship.
Well,
This
at least
this bylaw is separate from the Community Planning Act.
I get it, but the notion I'm told, unless somebody corrects me again, is that the Community Planning Act gives the authority to grant to the PRAC in the current configuration to the Planning Advisory Committee in the generic sense, but not to us. That's.
Your Worship, if I just may expand on that a little bit.
Yes, certainly.
I appreciate you're fairly close to what you're stating is there, is that what gets a little foggy is that what we're trying to do is allow for temporary exemptions under our zoning bylaw, which this was the case of 182 water. So under the Community Planning Act, this is how this particular business at 182 water was kind of allowed, because it wasn't allowed to exist at all under their zoning bylaw without a temporary rezoning request. And so they submitted that, and then the PRAC at the day requested council's opinion on it. And through our recommendations, and they turned into terms and conditions under the temporary permit as authorized by the PRAC. And so that is kind of the wording. I mean, this is a very unique situation is what we have to remember. And in this case, in this particular case, the person was establishing kind of a temporary shelter around it, as opposed to just pulling in a truck and cranking open a window, if you will, and selling food items out of it. That there's kind of a partial structure and stuff there. And so the council agreed to that back in November with proper shielding on premise bathrooms, other items to reduce noise and things. And so that was forwarded back to the PRAC, or maybe eventually the PAC, that incorporated those agreements into the 1-year process. And after the 1 year is up, no one can authorize that to go any longer without a major amendment to the zoning bylaw. I think that's right. So if you don't mind, can Mr. Gopin expand on that?
Yeah, sure. So there's two things going on here. You've got, and you're also dealing with two different acts, the Community Planning Act and the Local Governance Act. So the Community Planning Act deals with temporary authorizations that otherwise wouldn't be allowed in the zoning bylaw. So PRAC or PAC has control over allowing things that would not otherwise be allowed in the zoning bylaw. That's not something council has control over. But what you're looking at here is an amendment to the Peddlers licensing bylaw, and that's a bylaw under the Local Governance Act. So I think what Councillor Grew is saying, and I think this does work, is the advisory committee still has approval over the temporary use, but under this, the temporary use of a food truck or a peddler, something that is defined in that bylaw, council gets the final say over that. So in theory, using the example of 182 Water Street, PRAC has said, we approve the temporary use. Now, that works for the zoning bylaw, but that temporary use includes something that is currently not allowed in the Peddlers, under the Peddlers permit bylaw, which again is under a different act. So I think if you make this change, council gets to control the food truck aspect of it, not necessarily a food truck, but the peddling permit. Council can approve those or not based on that bylaw. So you could get into a slightly weird situation where the PRAC has approved a use that technically can't actually happen because council has said you're not allowed to have a food truck at this location, or we won't grant you a peddler's license for this location. So hopefully that clarifies it.
Not much.
I think council, well, they might
I'm
be
still looking for
major
the KISS principle here. Look,
changes. Okay.
I understand
don't
what you're
see-
saying.
Yeah, from a Community Planning Act point of view, there wouldn't be any issues with what Councillor Grew is suggesting for a change as to council having control over the peddling permit side of it. Council doesn't get control over the temporary use, they get control over the peddling permit.
Right. Okay.
But,
But-
sorry, Worship, but what we're trying to do with this reiteration of the bylaw was tie it all in, where there was a temporary use when the temporary use was granted through the recommendation of council, then it automatically excluded it from the peddler's permit. A different avenue we could take, if that's council's preference, is that council can approve individual food truck applications. And so it goes down two separate avenues.
Oh, I guess that's what I was getting at. What I was getting at, Mr. Goatman, sorry, I didn't mean to make light of what you were saying. It was, what I was getting at is if Councillor Grew is correct, or what he's suggesting is in fact possible, why do we need the Planning Advisory Committee at all in a peddler's permit application that council could just decide?
I think because in the zoning bylaw, it ties back to that peddler's permit. And so I have to look more at that particular issue. But I think there aren't really any zones that you can have a food truck in. So the only way to do that is with the temporary use authorization. So unless you made some amendments to the zoning bylaw to allow, maybe in the tourist commercial zone, you allow food trucks as a use. Then I think through the changes to the peddler's permit that Councilor Grew is suggesting, council would have the say over, do they get a permit for that food truck while it's allowed in that zone?
Right.
Your
So,
worship, if I may, this is, as has been said, is an unusual situation in that to make this use happen, you have to have two things happen. You have to have an approval from council under the peddler's permit, and you have to have a temporary use under the zoning bylaw. So those two ingredients have to be there to allow the use to take place. And that's what I've tried to capture in this this amendment is you have to have those two conditions so that the business has to be approved by the town of St. Andrews Council, and a temporary use has to be granted by the advisory committee. So those two ingredients have to be there.
yes, I understand what you're saying in the peddler's permit, but when you go back to the temporary use under the Community Planning Act, the only reason we got a say in that is that the PRAC decided to ask our advice. They didn't need to ask our advice. They could have approved the temporary use without us being involved at all.
Absolutely.
So I'm sort of working from where I think you're coming from, where I personally don't like the Community Planning Act provision at all. And I think it should all come to us first. And I don't see the need for the PRAC to be involved in either one of those things. But the reality of it is that they seem to be two pieces of legislation that are not harmonized between the two of them in terms of the way the process works. Eh?
No.
So, so anyway, so the wording that we have here attempts to harmonize them. Your wording doesn't harmonize them.
Well, my
But-
wording does harmonize them in that what I'm suggesting is that under the peddler's permit, it's up to council to approve the business as a temporary business. And under the Community Planning Act, it's up to the PAC to grant the temporary use.
Right.
And I don't, it doesn't matter how the PAC gets there, whether it's a recommendation of council or not.
Right.
But there's two separate bylaws at play here, two separate provincial acts. And this tries to address both of those acts.
Council, anybody else want to weigh in on this? I know Councillor Grew and I are having a good discussion, but does anybody else have an opinion here?
Through your worship, I'd say that I'm supporting this application from Mr. Bartlett and Mrs. Breeze, or sorry,
And
Mrs. Meehan, pardon me, Mrs. Meehan and Mr. Bartlett, based on the strength of their commitment to the town and their longstanding reputation as good town to put something there that everyone can be pleased with. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you, worship.
Thank you, Councillor Goumichel. Mr. Gopin,
So-
can you
Are we
comment?
going to go ahead with this, or are we?
Just one last question to Mr. Gopin. Is the suggestion made by Councillor Grew, is that a workable suggestion to harmonize the two things that we've been trying to figure out how to harmonize?
I think so. Like I said, you could get into some weird situations where you might have a bit of a confrontation between council and PAC if PAC is saying you can have temporary use for something that then council says you can't. And I think the way it's worded now would avoid that, but the way it's worded now doesn't give council any control. I'm not sure what happens in the case of a conflict between a local governance act bylaw and a community planning act bylaw. My assumption would be that if one thing there says it can't happen, then it just can't happen. And I guess one thing we're getting kind of really bogged down in the food truck idea here, and I think that's at the heart of the peddler's permit. There are temporary use authorizations that might have nothing to do with that. So, for example, one of the other temporary use authorizations that's been granted in St. Andrews is Sunbury Shores has applied for some to do more events and to have an extended liquor license for those events. So oftentimes they don't have anything to do with a physical development. And I just want to make sure that council understands that temporary uses are not just about food trucks. They can be about all sorts of different things. And I think the peddler's permit aspect of this would only affect things that are peddled. And it seems like we're kind of coming down, and that's mostly food trucks at this point in history.
Right. But it's just another interesting point. I mean, this is going to be a very long meeting if I keep talking, but it seems to me that it still goes back to whether or not you believe a planning advisory committee supersedes the authority of a council, even to decide whether somebody's liquor license should be extended without coming to us and tell us what impact you think that's going to have on your community. If a planning advisory committee has that independent authority, I don't see that at all, actually. But that's a philosophical discussion that we're not going to get anywhere if I keep talking. So I'll stop now. But
Your worship,
yep.
if I may, it's just to go back, that we're trying to, as we say, harmonize these as few steps as we could, is why we talked about it before. But we could go back to our peddler's permit and only issue, because right now the peddler's permit says it can be issued by the clerk. But we could just say, okay, no more. We could amend it just to say that the peddler's permit can only be issued by a motion of council. It doesn't have to be 3 readings. It just application comes in, yay or nay, goes out, and that would put it in. It, it's the same end to this, or different route to the same end. It's just, again, we're trying to combine these so
Right.
that it was all one step, but it's, because if you remember, and while I appreciate Councillor Gumachel's comment about this particular project, the bylaw amendments are supposed to apply in general terms, not just to a specific individual. So we're trying to make it a little more general. So individuals with similar ideas still have the opportunity to come in. So I guess we go back. Do you want to recommend to staff that maybe the easiest thing is that we just say that the clerk does not have the authority anymore, that it just council has to say okay to any applications and move forward? The only thing that you're going to run into with that is this one's okay because it's mid-winter for a summertime operation. But if someone comes in with something legitimate midsummer for a 1 or 2 day item, and so we've had those before, like the ladies selling homemade sweaters set up at Market Square a few Saturdays a couple of summers ago, then that would delay things like that. But I'm just looking for direction from council, because council had, I won't say assured, but when we approved the 182 Water Street, the recommendation back to the PRAC for the temporary use, we kind of had given the assurance to the person that we'd probably amend the bylaw in order to, so he could continue with their work this summer.
Right.
Your worship,
Understand. Councillor Group.
thank you. Yeah, to follow up on what Mr. Spear was just saying is that under the current bylaw right now, the clerk can issue a peddler's permit for up to 6 weeks. And there's nothing in the bylaw that says he can't continually renew that for the duration that the permit is required. So it gives the town right now actually has the ability to issue a permit and just keep renewing it for the amount of time that it's required. So the solution is already there. We don't have to amend the bylaw if we don't want to. And just give the clerk direction that I think council is all in favor of allowing this use to continue, and just allow the clerk to do it. And we don't have to pass through the 3 readings and public hearings and all that sort of stuff. And it would make everyone's job a whole lot easier.
Council, what do you think of that idea?
Through you, your worship.
Yes.
I think what we're trying to prevent is having, these trucks, food trucks or whatever, pop up all over downtown. In previous councils, we have not allowed them, but we have to allow our staff to make judgments on our behalf, especially during the summer, as Mr. Spear has said. So I think we have to give him the support, our support, if he so deems that it should be redeemed, should be renewed or whatever. We have to trust that he's doing it in the best interest of our town and our council and our people of St. Andrews. So if we don't have to go through all these jump through the hoops things, then perhaps we just leave it in our CAO's capable hands, and he makes that decision for us and for the town or at that time. And I do think this 181 is a good project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Akergy. So in fact, is it too much? Is it too simplistic for me to suggest that we could just table this and withdraw it, and then we could in fact just go for, at least right now, with the wording of the peddler's bylaw as it is, and to allow the clerk to deal with that? It's always optional. If the clerk denies someone, we would always tell that someone, and I'm not suggesting in this case, I'm just saying if the clerk denies the next person, they can always appeal to council, and council could hear their appeal and decide whether or not they want to make a different decision, I would assume. That's council, what do you think?
Sorry, your
Okay.
worship, can I interrupt again? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I will say, we had a legal opinion prior to we started this before Christmas. I don't have it on my hand that said we should amend our peddler's permit. So the staff just didn't wake up one day, decide to amend the bylaw without
No, I
getting
agree.
some input. So I don't, you can feel free to table it so we can circle back and do our homework again, because it's been so long. And after this discussion, I'm like everybody else, I'm a little confused, but nonetheless, we had a legal opinion that the peddler's bylaw had to be amended. So I don't think it's as easy as, well, to say leave it up to staff. I think there was a reason that we've started this process. And so if you want to table it, staff can move it forward at maybe one of our special meetings in a couple of weeks, once we've circled back with our lawyer to look at the opinion again. But, you know, and maybe the clerk can back me up on this or tell me if I'm crazy, but I'm pretty sure we had an opinion at the time that the
Yeah,
bylaw as is, that this particular development would be in violation if we.
I do
amended
recall
this.
that, but I,
Sorry, through you, your worship, there was a section, and it's specifically within the letter maintained to the zoning bylaw and the food truck portion of the zoning bylaw, which stipulates that that they're not allowed on the town lands and town properties. I would have to look up the section again, but we did have to amend the bylaw for because of the zoning bylaw.
okay. Well, maybe we should just see if Councillor Gru's wording stands up, and if we circle back, and then within 2 weeks, we'll bring it back. Does that suit council for tonight? So we'll have a motion to table that, and we'll have our staff just double check.
Your worship,
Yep,
your worship, can I make a recommendation?
certainly.
Because this isn't part of the Community Planning Act at the end of the day, we're just trying to tie the two together. I would like to say maybe go through first reading and then we can amend it for second reading before we go to the public consultation, and at least it'll get that over with. And because it's just that we're running out of time with this council to get things done. So I'm not saying not to amend it in the future. I'm just saying get first reading done with this change, and then we'll make note of it and go back to legal and the planners to ensure we're messing up anything with these amendments.
Council,
Sounds good.
we'll do that, and then we'll at least have it on the order paper. And Councillor Gru, we will have staff circle back and talk to our lawyers again about the wording that you're proposing, because and how we can get around the issues potentially that are causing us some concern. Okay,
So are we approving, your worship, the change that I had suggested?
Yeah, so your worship will need, as Councillor Gru says, so right now, theoretically, there's a motion on the table by Councillor Gru for those two amendments to the definitions. So we
Right.
need a seconder for those.
We haven't voted on the first one.
Well, it's because he amended the first motion. So
Right.
we have to vote on the amendment, then circle back and vote on the amended motion.
okay, thank you, Councillor, or thank you, Mr. Spear. All right, I'll look for a motion to look for a seconder for the motion to amend the motion put forward by Councillor Gru. Do I have a seconder for that?
Remember, councillors, the deputy mayor and Councillor Harrison are offline, so it only leaves the three of you to second it there.
This is just to put it forward. It's not etched in stone.
Only first reading.
Okay, I'll second it then.
Thank you, Councillor Akaji. And any further questions? If not, all in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
I,
Any opposed? Hearing none. So now I will look for a motion to approve the
Actually, your worship,
the bylaw.
sorry to interrupt. Yeah,
Right.
well, you've already got a first and a second there, so you can just vote on that now.
Yeah, we
You had it
did.
First by Councillor Bishop and seconded by Councillor Gru, and he amended it, so now you're just voting on the amended. Motion. You've already got your mover and seconder.
Okay, so I thought we voted all in favor of the amended motion.
We did the amendment. We didn't do the
Of the
original.
amendments themselves. Now you're
Mhm.
doing, now you're approving first reading of the bylaw.
Okay. Thank you. Now I'll look for a motion to approve for first reading the bylaw as amended.
So moved.
And the seconder,
Second.
Councilor Groove, sorry. Councilor Groove, thank you. All in favor of approving the bylaw for first reading? And I will have to get a thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none. We've approved that for first reading, and now I'm going to have to read it, but with the amended sections. Councilor Groove, I might need some help here because I did not.
Sure, Your Worship, I'll read the amendments to you and you can amend accordingly.
Right.
Okay, the definition of exempt temporary business means a business that has been approved by the Town of St. Andrews Council and granted a temporary use by the Advisory Committee of the Town of St. Andrews with authority under Section 53(2)(1) of the Community Planning Act.
Right.
Okay, and in the second section, 6.1, I guess it is. Okay, adding a section to the transient trader's license. The new wording is a person can operate an exempt temporary business for a period of up to 1 year within the municipality if it has been approved by the Town of St. Andrews Council and granted a temporary use by the Advisory Committee of the Town of St. Andrews with authority under Section 53(2)(1) of the Community Planning Act.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Groove. That has been approved, correct?
Correct, Your Worship.
That was the, no, you have to read the bylaw now, Your Worship.
Yeah, I will.
Maybe, okay, you read, or, yeah, you had your vote, I think.
Yes.
Mr. Knopper,
The vote,
you had your vote.
yes,
You read the
yes, Your
bylaw.
Worship, the vote has been done. You just need to read the bylaw.
All right, I will now read for the first time amendment number 1 to bylaw 75, a bylaw regulating and licensing peddlers and transient traders. Be it enacted by the Council of the Town of St. Andrews that bylaw number 75, the bylaw regulating licensing peddlers and transient traders is hereby amended as follows. 1, by adding the definition of exempt temporary business and replacing it with the following. Exempt temporary business means a business that has been approved by the Town of St. Andrews Council and granted temporary use permit by the advisory council or advisory committee, the planning advisory committee of the Town of St. Andrews with authority under Section 53(2)(1) of the Community Planning Act. And 2, by adding to Section Transient Traders License, a person can operate an exempt temporary business within the municipality if it has been approved by the Council of the Town of St. Andrews and granted a temporary use permit by the Planning Advisory Committee under the authority of Section 52(1) of the Community Planning Act, read for the first time this first day of March 2021. Okay. Councillor Akaji, we move on.
Hey,
Your Worship, before we move on, there is a second motion under Councillor Bishop's report. It's to call for a public consultation session.
Okay, thank you. FA 210104B, that council sets the date of Monday, March 22nd, 21, at 6 o'clock via electronic meeting for a public consultation session on amendment number 1 to bylaw number 75, regulating licensing of peddlers and transient traders.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Akaji. Questions, council? If not, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Oh, Your Worship, Your Worship, sorry, before you get to the vote. We just had a bit of an amendment. We're coming back with the second draft of this bylaw. It's gonna have changes, so I'm not sure if you're ready yet to go to public consultation or push it ahead a little bit so we can have second reading with an agreed upon bylaw. Because the amendments that Councillor Grew made were just to get the bylaw through first reading. I thought they still wanted to review other avenues we may take. If I'm wrong, I'll stand to be corrected, but because we talked about that, we might not even have to do that, but that under the peddler's permit, I just asked for first reading so we could start with it. So.
Okay, so what we're suggesting here is that we might want to have second reading after we go back and do a little more legal research here. Correct? And then we won't do the public, we won't do the hearing of objections at that stage, correct?
Maybe let the clerk chime in. I'm just concerned that we're going to have a different looking bylaw to go to the consultation session with.
No, Your Worship, and through you, CAO. Yeah, I would concur with that. We would just need a motion to table the motion for public consultation, and then we'll come back with information.
Okay.
Your Worship,
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop, if you don't mind to.
I'll make a motion to table that then.
Your Worship.
Okay.
If I
Yes.
could just add in, this is a fairly inconsequential bylaw. I think that council has almost unanimously agreed that it's something we want to do to permit this activity to take place for 182 Water Street. I'm not sure that going to a public consultation on something this trivial would be of any benefit. I don't think there's going to be a significant public outcry, and it might be adequate just to allow people to comment via email or via Zoom or whatever on something as trivial as this bylaw, because it doesn't really change that much for very many people.
Well, yeah, but I think that let's table this for now. We're going to get a little more information, and we can
Yeah,
decide whether we go
exactly, but
right to second reading or whether we go.
That's what I'm suggesting, is just go to second and third reading and.
Yeah, okay,
get it done.
but for now, we table that second motion. Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Councillor Crew, and Councillor Bishop, you can proceed with tabling that.
So I made a motion to table that second part, that B part of the motion. So somebody needs to second that.
Yep. Seconder, please.
I'll
Councillor
second.
Crew, thank you. All in favor of tabling that part of the motion, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is approved.
Okay, now I can go.
Now you can go.
PW 210201. And the date was February 17th, 2021. And the subject is the surplus public works mower 2014 Gravely 460. So the background is the town of St. Andrews is looking to, oh, we didn't invite the other guys back.
They are
They're
back.
Oh, they are back. Oh, sorry. The town of St. Andrews is looking to move a public works mower to surplus equipment and sell it through the budget process. Council approved the purchase of a new mower as the 2014 version has completed its life cycle. The following is the information on the mower. 2014 Gravely 460 zero-turn mower with 1,380 hours of use. The mower will be sold as is, where is, and there are a couple of pictures with it. So the motion is that council declares the 2014 Gravely 460 zero-turn mower to surplus equipment for the purpose of sale.
Thank you, Councillor Akaji. Can I have a seconder for that motion, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. If there aren't any questions, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is approved. Now we will move on to Councillor Gumashal.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next item on the agenda is reference number RCS 210201. And it's dated February 22nd, submitted by myself, and the subject is Elizabeth Street Park naming. And the background reads, through the generous donation of the Dunn Foundation, the council instructed staff to create a pocket park at the Elizabeth Street end. In phase 2 of the project this spring, additional work including fencing and signage will be added to complete the project. Staff are seeking council's permission to name the location so it can be signed accordingly. An additional option of council to consider is the park after our sister community, Thorpe St. Andrews, UK. This could become a park that has information on their community and the importance of our twinning. And the motion reads, be it resolved that the new pocket park at, let me read that again. Be it resolved that the new pocket park at the end of Elizabeth Street, adjacent to Water Street, be called Elizabeth Street Park. And I'd make that motion.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gumashal. Could I have a seconder for that motion, please?
That, Mayor.
Councillor Akaji, thank you. Discussion, Council.
You're done.
Your Worship, although I don't recall in the third paragraph of the background when we set the wording at committee last week about Thorpe UK, but I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I just don't recall that being in the original wording background of the wording for the motion.
Through you, Your Worship, it was just from hearing from other councillors in discussion to bring the concept forward. It was through Mayor Naish as well. It was discussion that about other potential names that could come forward, and this was one that's been rattling around for a bit. So we wanted to present it as well to council.
Yeah, and Mr. Knopper, I don't think there would be anything to prevent us from going with the motion as it's stated, and perhaps as an additional feature of the park to provide that kind of informational stuff about our twin, town in England. It doesn't necessarily have to be called that to maybe use it for that purpose. In addition to, anyway, I'm going to call the motion.
Through your worship, if I may, that is new information, Councillor Gumashal's point, and I actually think it's a pretty good idea. Thorpe St. Andrew has consistently been promoting us and doing initiatives, and although there's nothing wrong with the name Elizabeth Street Park, there's really not much creativity behind it, and if we can draw some awareness and give a tribute to, and part of me is thinking of members of our community we've lost, like Bruce Thorpe. So I don't know, Thorpe Park to me is not necessarily a bad thing. I kind of like it.
I'm not disagreeing, but we're creating a number of pocket parks, and if we if we start naming them after people who've passed or whatever, then we're kind of locking ourselves into something versus having an idea that unifies them all along as we add them. We could have some sort of a broader plan and a vision than just naming them once they're done, it's done, and that's it. You could have, I don't know what the plan might be, but I know that when we set the wording of the motion, the third paragraph wasn't in there, and I would have brought it up at that time rather than belabor this meeting, which is already there.
No, it's fine. I'm glad you brought it up. So,
Fair point, Councillor Gumashal.
Elizabeth
Yeah.
Street it is. If we could vote on it.
So, Deputy Mayor, are you suggesting that you might want to make we've already got the motion,
No, through your worship, I will not make a motion to amend. I agree with Councillor Gumashell to name them all individually. Good luck finding out which one's which. There's another way in which we can acknowledge Thorpe St. Andrew and all the great things that they have to offer and all the things that they're doing to promote us as well. So
Right.
no amendment requested.
Alrighty. So it'll two good things, two separate good things. All right, like it. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. It's Elizabeth Street Park. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next item is RCS 210202, submitted by myself, and the subject is Outdoor Fitness Center, SORTI. And the background reads, the town of St. Andrews has been approached by the St. Andrews Outdoor Recreation and Trails Incorporated to install an outdoor fitness center. The request is to develop space at Pagan Park near the parking and trailhead location. Staff have proposed additional options such as Landmade Park and along the trail system. In order to proceed, staff need direction to move into an agreement with SORTI for installation of the park. The park is hinging on a grant from the New Horizon for Seniors grants. Please see supporting details. And the motion reads, the council allows for staff to sign into an agreement with the St. Andrews Outdoor Recreation and Trails Incorporated for an outdoor fitness park located at Pagan Point Park in St. Andrews under the terms and conditions identified by the Chief Administrative Officer.
Okay, could I have a seconder for that, please?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Harrison. Discussion, Council.
Good idea.
Your worship.
Yes,
Yeah, so I guess first and foremost, thank you to SORTI for going after this. I do think it'd be a wonderful addition to our community. Hopefully it's something myself I would actually use. But although I really appreciate it and think it'd be good for the community, I personally, I don't think that is the ideal location for such a project. Simply for the fact that when you drive around the point, it is one of the most scenic places that you can go in town, with beautiful views of the bay, followed by open green space where you see people, running and enjoying. Although it's a great project, I don't see that having some equipment when you go around that point sitting there. I don't see that as the ideal location. And the other thing to consider is some people aren't comfortable working out in front of other people, and the traffic that goes around there would be a constant place. So I would love for the town to meet with SORTI and discuss other locations. Ideas that jump out to me is you have Blockhouse and Centennial Park, which are key attractions. Centennial Park needs a revamp. In my opinion, it's underutilized in our community. It has a washroom facility at Centennial Park, and it provides some shelter from the winds. It also provides a little bit of privacy from cars driving by. So for myself, I just can't picture driving around the point and seeing a bunch of fitness gear just sitting there in the corner by the trailhead. And the other thing is, I know that they're specifically putting it by the trail, but the actual active transportation trail map indicates that eventually there will be a trail that goes by Centennial Park. So I just think Centennial Park would be a far superior location than putting it in the middle of the open while you're going around the point.
thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anyone else have a comment?
I think that's a fine comment. I really like Deputy Mayor's comments.
Thank you, Councilor Bishop. So the motion is really to, allow
Sorry, Your
staff
Worship,
to-
Councillor Groot has his hand up.
oh, sorry, Councilor Group.
You're on mute.
Councillor Groot.
That explains it.
Sorry.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the deputy mayor's comments, and Centennial Park could be a good venue. One of the things that I comes to mind is I've noticed that there's Centennial Park has been a popular wedding venue, and having fitness equipment at that venue may detract from that. And it is a little bit out of the way, but it does have parking available. There is it is a good venue in that respect, but I'm concerned that it may detract from the other uses at Centennial Park. With regards to the location that was selected, yeah, I hear what the deputy mayor is saying, and it is a valid point. But I also think that at one point we were considering putting a washroom facility in that location. And it is adjacent to a parking area, which is not the most attractive area on that particular site. So all food for thought. And I think that, I think this is a good thing for the town. And it's just a matter of finding a good location for that equipment. Thank you.
Is there a burning reason why we need to make this decision tonight?
Well,
From my perspective, Councillor Gu could answer better probably with his connections through Dave Johnson, but it's a springtime project, and the last time I looked, we're several weeks away from springtime. So if we deferred it for a month, I'm sure we can have a further discussion with them.
They don't have the funding right now, and they're waiting for, I think in the background, it indicated that they're waiting for the New Horizons for Seniors grants. So they're not due to start construction right away.
Would Katie's Cove not be a nice place to go work out and have a beautiful view?
Your worship, if I may through you,
Councilor Gomichelle? Yeah, go ahead.
to allay a couple of concerns. First of all, the equipment that they've been looking at is not ugly gym equipment. It's functional and low vis, and it would be off to the side. It's also one key element that's missing from the background is that this would be an accessible workout place. So people who are in wheelchairs or have mobility issues would be able to go in here and be able to work out, which ties in nicely with the accessible bird watching platform that we're building near the sewage treatment, the sewage lagoon. So you can, we're trying to include everybody. And given that we were considering bathrooms at this location, it's probably a good location. However, the location doesn't have to be determined isn't determined in the motion. It's just for the CAO to go forward. But certainly there are reasons why that's the best spot. I think if you go starting to change things around down at Centennial Park, you'll get a few letters from the community. I think a lot of people like Centennial Park just the way it is, and myself being one of them. Unless you could make it more accessible. Anyhow, those so a lot of these things have been considered, and that seems to be the best location down by Indian Point Park. Nice looking workout gear, Brad. Don't worry.
The motion itself only calls for us to allow our staff to negotiate something with SORTI to make an agreement, and that agreement obviously would have to include where the exercise equipment would be located, or the exercise park would be located. So it doesn't mean we're committing it to anything other than to sit down and talk to them about that. Is this going to, I know it's not urgent, but is the funding that has been applied for, do you think the existence of an agreement with the town and the location would seem to have some impact on whether or not they get the funding? No?
They've already applied for the grant and it's under consideration at this time.
Okay, so going forward with this tonight is not necessarily essential to their success with the funding. Okay. All right.
Your worship, the deputy mayor had his hand up as well.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, sorry.
I just wanted to point of clarification. The motion does actually put this equipment at a certain location. It says in the motion at Pagan Point Park in St. Andrews. So the motion, the way that it reads today, would put it there.
Okay, sorry, I missed that again. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So, look, if someone wishes.
I'd like to make a motion to table it for now as to regarding the location. So if somebody wants to second the motion to table it, hey.
Okay, look for a seconder for a motion to table.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. All in favor of tabling, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
Councilor Goodmichelle, I saw your hand, yes. Okay. All right, we will table that motion then for now.
We're just tabling it for the location, not because of the subject matter.
That's how I interpret it,
Mhm.
Councilor Bishop.
Thank you.
Okay. Next here.
Oh, me again, your worship, I think. Reference number RCS 210203. And the subject is Canada Healthy Communities Initiative Fund. And the background reads, this is extensive. The Canada Healthy Communities Initiative, CHCI, is providing up to $31 million in existing federal funding to support communities as they deploy new ways to adapt spaces and services to respond to immediate and ongoing needs arising from COVID-19 over the next 2 years. There are 2 application intakes, with the first deadline for applications for 2021 being March 9th at 5 p.m. The second deadline is June 25th at 5 p.m. The initiative is supporting projects under 3 main themes. Firstly, creating safe and vibrant public spaces. Secondly, improving mobility options. And thirdly, digital solutions. Staff are presenting 2 options for council to consider for application. Number 1, bike fix stations. The installation of up to 6 plus stations. See attached documents for details on stations. Number 2, Van Horn trail lighting. Light the trail between Water Street and Prince of Wales. See attached documents for details on the lighting options. And I would add that they're low lamps. And finally, number 3, accessible ramps for storefronts in downtown St. Andrews to increase access to businesses. So the motion RCS 210203 reads that council approves the application for blank to the Canada Health Communities Initiative Fund for the March 9th, 2021 submission.
Thank you, Councilor Goodmichelle. Can I have a seconder for that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilor Harrison. Council, we have to decide what it is that we're going to apply for if we're going to pass this motion. Thoughts on that?
Your worship?
Yes.
I know we discussed this at the committee meeting, and at the time, I think everybody jumped on board. It was a great idea, but I guess sober second thought is I have a few questions on the accessible ramps for storefronts, and perhaps our expert, I guess when it comes to grants, Mr. Nopper could help me out on some of the questions I have, and one of them, the first one, I guess, is many of these accessible ramps will be on private property. And I'm not sure if the town can apply for a grant for infrastructure on someone else's property. That's number 1. Number 2 is ramps extending onto the sidewalk may pose some sort of a trip hazard. And then the third one is, would any ramps adversely affect or impact on the heritage character of the town? So those are the 3 questions I have on those, and I don't know if Mr. Nopper or some of the other councillors could weigh in on that and enlighten me as to those kind of issues before we proceed for a grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Group.
May I say something?
Certainly.
I'm just looking at the background. Staff are presenting 2 options and there's 3 options there. Maybe we should leave off the accessible ramps, although we all know they're needed, but there's problem details with, as Mr. Grew or Councillor Grew is saying. So the bike fix stations and the Van Horn trail lighting might be the 2 options you might want to look at.
Thank you, Councilor Bishop. Anyone else want to, Councilor Goodmichelle?
Worship, I think in the background, it says there's $31 million available, and it's a case of if you don't ask, you won't get it. So I applaud Mr. Nopper in taking the initiative to look at some of these things. If we get some money for ramps and that we're not on it, we decide that we don't want the ramps, well, we could always give the money back, but if we don't ask for it, we're not gonna get it. So I think we should just pass this motion and move on. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Anyone
Your
else?
Worship.
Yes,
Yeah, I concur with Councillor Gumashell. Of course, I did bring this originally through. They are good questions. However, there's communities all across the world that have heritage designation that have ramps. So I'm sure that although we might not have the design in front of us today, part of that process would be to get it. There is a lot of those ramps would be encroached on town land because most of them don't actually have land. They're building stops and they do. I think we put this through and figure it out if we are successful. But if you're someone that has no mobility, everything we're saying is stuff that we should be able to figure out and overcome for their sake of making St. Andrews accessible to all.
thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think on that basis, we'll include, I think my assessment is we should include all three of those options in the application that we're voting on. And so unless someone else has a comment, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of, sorry?
Can I see just, I've got a few thoughts. I think putting all three of those together, that $31 million is across Canada. So if you bump them all up to a couple of $100,000 project, it's probably going to increase the chances of it getting thrown out. That'd be better to do one or two applications, in my opinion. As noted in the background, there is two receivings. They're good for application periods. There's one that's coming up end of this Monday, and then or a week from tomorrow, I guess Tuesday, and then another one on June 25th. So we could decide just to do one or two of them tonight, and then work on the third one. I applaud the accessible ramps for downtown, but there's a whole bunch of questions that Councilor Gru's brought up. But are we going to make them accessible to everybody? So because we have to put a dollar figure to this thing. So are we going to rely on staff in the next week to go up and down the business district and just request that any business that wants one, that we'll figure it out and add there, and that assume that the council will provide access to the sidewalk, because they'll have to get an encroachment agreement for all of these.
Right.
And some of the stores will have to adjust themselves so that there's room inside the store for the wheelchair accessible people?
Even the doorways wouldn't be wide enough.
Right, some of them are so narrow. There's a lot of.
Councilor Gru, you're on mute still.
Thank you. I was just going to state that it may prove to be a challenge if you put a ramp in and that the wheelchair can't fit through the doorway at the end of the ramp.
Yeah.
So it may prove to be a challenge there, and certainly we may have to work in consultation with the store owners and with the building owners to make the facilities accessible. I think it's a very worthwhile goal. I have no problem applying for the grants to make it happen, but I think it's a much bigger project than we see at first blush. So I think we have to be cognizant of that as we move ahead.
March the 9th is coming on quickly. Maybe we do the first two March the 9th and then work on the third one for the 25th.
But again, I'll reiterate that it's a very small fund going nationally across Canada. The chances of us getting more than one of them is probably slim. The chance of us getting one of them are probably slim because we've applied to this. So if the council feels strongly about the third option there, and I applaud it, maybe we could work together, forego the application deadline next week, but work diligently with the BIA and the downtown business owners to come up with a plan that we can make an application knowing all the facts and make a submission. It says by June 25th, but it could be any time between, but I'll leave that up to council's discretion.
Your worship,
Your
the
worship,
intake.
Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Hopper, you had a comment?
Yeah, sorry, your worship, the intake runs from the beginning of May or about mid-May till the end of June for the second intake. So just for council's knowledge.
Okay. So,
Through your worship.
yeah.
I just, I'm not sure if all of council had the opportunity to actually read what the grant's actually for. Like, I know we have these motions, but when you actually read the grant, it talks about a number of things. It talks about making your community safer. It talks about responding to COVID, and it responds. The other big thing is about making your community more accessible. No disrespect to our desire to have these bicycle repair stations, but we applied for them last year and we didn't get approved because looking at the grant and what we're asking for, I don't think that it would be approved. I think when you're looking at this particular grant, you should tailor your request to what the main purpose of the grant is. And that's why accessible storefront makes more sense to me. And I fully don't expect us to put ramps in every single store in downtown. It would be a huge, huge expenditure. But if the town of St. Andrews could figure a way to get $10,000, $20,000 to put a few more in, so a few more people that can't get into our shops have the opportunity. And in order to qualify for the town funding of this, you do have to have your door wide enough. You do have to be able to make your lanes in your store wide enough. Some people won't do it, but there will be some that does. And I also talked to the BIA about this, and the BIA had interest. They had a grant last year. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar, but I think we're giving up to $500 for people that painted the front of their store, like they updated it. So they're interested in potentially forming a grant to match ours to encourage businesses to do this. So we're not going to fix it overnight, but if this council can get people that are in wheelchairs or have no mobility into 3 or 4 more stores, that's a great start. And that to me is what the whole that's what this fund's about. And I really think that if we submit the repair stations, I think it's going to be rejected because it doesn't meet the guidelines of the fund. I think if we want those repair stations, we should add it in our budget process and pay for them ourselves.
Okay, council. What are we going to do here? We're, you know, we've had a number of ideas. We've kicked this around the block, but I think what I'm hearing is that perhaps the third issue is the one that meets the standards of the program better than the rest of them. And maybe if we want the other 2 things, we find another way to do it. And I agree with that.
Your worship?
Yep.
If I could, I would suggest that perhaps we submit the Van Horn Trail lighting because that has potential of getting approved because it does make our community more accessible. And we submit that for the 9th of March deadline. And because the accessible ramps requires a little bit more thought, a little bit more effort, we submit that one for the 25th of June intake.
Okay, council,
Sounds good.
everybody like that? I like that idea. It fits. And don't forget the bike stations will fit in. So Mr. Spear will find some money somewhere else for that. Right, Mr. Spear?
Your worship,
Thank you.
I think Councillor Drew's idea about the Van Horn lighting too is nice because you can walk the trail at night.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a safety thing as well.
You'd see the skunks.
Okay, what do we need to do? We call the question and we apply for 2 and 3. But we apply for number 2 in the first release and number 3 in the second release, subject to a bit more homework to be done in conjunction with the downtown businesses. Okay.
Thank you.
We need the
Your
vote.
worship, yeah,
So we need.
so you have the motion moved by Councillor Gumashall and seconded by Councillor Harrison. And I guess it's now
Amended.
at least amended to read that it's going to be for the Van Horn Trail lighting, but there hasn't been a formal vote yet, your worship, on that final.
Great. All right, I'll call the question then, now that we all understand the motion. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Sorry?
Aye.
Aye, okay,
The deputy mayor, your worship.
okay. Okay, the motion is passed. Right. Next.
Will you, Councillor Goodmichelle?
Page 130, Councillor Goodmichelle. And your mute button's still on.
Councillor Gomichelle, your mute button's on.
Thank you. Thank you,
We
Kate.
can hear you.
All right. RCS 210204 submitted by myself, and the subject is Katie's Cove Incorporated support letter. And the background reads, Katie's Cove Incorporated is seeking a letter of support from the Town of St. Andrews Council for the purposes of land donation acquisition from the Algonquin Hotel. The request outlines the goal of receiving the donated land for the purposes of developing the area into a recreational asset for the town and Charlotte County. Provided with this report is a copy of the letter for submission. And the motion RCS 210204 reads that council supports Katie's Cove Incorporated in their pursuit to attain land from the Algonquin Hotel for the purposes of revitalizing Katie's Cove.
Thank you, Councillor Michelle. Can I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank
Councillor-
you, Councillor Bishop. Discussion, council? Everybody good with the letter?
Yes.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion is passed. Okay,
Councillor Drew,
right. Councillor Harrison.
Yes, thank you. It's PED 200501D, and it's zoning bylaw Z21-01, and it's the second reading. The background is the Town of St. Andrews has been working on the draft document for the zoning bylaw Z21-01. The bylaw is currently at first reading, and the town has conducted a public hearing of objections that was held Monday, Feb 8th, 2021, as per the Community Planning Act. If council deems significant changes are needed, another public hearing of objections is needed. Based on the planner's recommendation of no significant changes, council can move forward to second reading. So the motion would be, or the motion is I'm making, that council grant leave for second reading to bylaw number Z21-01, being the zoning bylaw for the town of St. Andrews.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for that motion, please?
Councillor Drew, your worship.
Okay, thank you. Comments, council?
Councillor Drew, your
Councillor
worship.
Drew, your worship.
Councillor Groom?
Thank you, your worship. I think I'd like to start off by saying council has done an awful lot of work, and many thanks to Mr. Gopin for his many sleepless nights crafting this bylaw and all of his effort on this, because it's been a long journey. I'll say that for to start off. My one comment I have right now is that it's with regards to short-term rentals. At the present time, short-term rentals are not permitted except for tourist homes. And this bylaw greatly expands upon that. And don't get me wrong, I am fully in favor of allowing Airbnbs, short-term rentals, whatever. But I really feel strongly that we need to have regulations to protect the traveling public and public safety. I think there needs to be measures in place for respecting neighbors. And we need to ensure that there's a level playing field for all short-term rental providers. The challenge is that this zoning bylaw basically allows short-term rentals in every residential dwelling in the town of St. Andrews with no controls whatsoever. I know that council is working on a short-term rental bylaw, but this zoning bylaw does not address that. And therefore, I would suggest a minor amendment to paragraph 3.34 of this zoning bylaw, just to state what council has already stated, is that short-term rentals will only be permitted in accordance with the short-term rental bylaw. Right now, the way 3.34 is worded, it's sort of, if we have a short-term rental bylaw, then you apply that. But this zoning bylaw, as I said, it allows short-term rentals in every residential property in town with no controls whatsoever, which I think is an error, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Groove. Mr. Gopin, are you still on board with us?
I am, your worship. So I can address that point, and I think the expectation is that council will pass a short-term rental bylaw as soon as possible. And there will be regulation for short-term rentals, and that was the expectation with this policy. The reason it's worded like that is so that if there is a gap or delay, that the status quo can continue for the time being, and allow the short-term rentals that are in existence currently to continue operating until that short-term rental bylaw comes into effect. While it seems like a very minor word change, I do believe it would be considered substantial in terms of the Community Planning Act, meaning another public hearing. And it's quite possible you'll have the short-term rental bylaw passed by then anyways, but as well, I really think council, there's other bylaws that depend on this bylaw being passed. There's developments that are kind of waiting, and it has been quite a long time. So I would really encourage council to pass this in its current form, and then to really work quickly to pass that short-term rental bylaw. But if the language changes now, A, you're going to have to go back for another public hearing, and B, until that time, any existing short-term rental would have to cease. That might be, we're coming into that season already. So if you leave it as it is now, it's the status quo. There would be the requirement of any new short-term rental would have to get a development permit. So you actually are adding even just there a little bit more regulation. So that's my feelings on that matter.
Thank you, Mr. Gopin. Council, anybody else want to comment?
If I could, on that same topic, I think I'd have to agree with our planner that, I mean, for one huge point, it's important that we don't have an issue where there is a gap where our short-term rentals would be deemed to be contravening the bylaw. And it really should motivate us to get the short-term rental adjunct bylaw, or the other bylaw done as well. And but I'd much rather see a short period of time where there may be less regulation than a short period of time where all of a sudden we ban all short-term rentals. Like, I think that would be a horrible outcome if that's what actually happened. So I think, to follow up on our planner, that we should proceed with this as it's written now, and just to have that as motivation to finish our short-term rental bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Anyone else want to comment?
Just a clarification, your worship.
Yep.
Is we haven't enforced the short-term rental issue for 10 years. So I don't think there's going to be a gap now all of a sudden, because many of these short-term rentals have operated outside of the bylaw for quite a length of time. So I don't think that's really a valid point at this point. But, I take, the point is well taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Groove. Anyone else want to comment? Otherwise, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none.
Oh,
Your worship, there was Councillor Grew.
I didn't see. Okay, didn't see. Thank you, Councillor Grew. Duly noted. I will then move to read by title. This must be reading night, isn't it, Mr. Knopfer? I haven't read so much since I used to go to the library every day.
I think it's bedtime stories given the time.
Well, settle in here because here it goes. Even reading by title. So this is read by title on the first day of March 2021. This is bylaw Z21-01, and I will move forward here. Contents 1.0, title and scope. 1.1, definitions. 2.0, administrative and interpretive clauses. 2.1, zoning classifications. 2.2, powers of the town council. 2.3, special powers of the Planning Advisory Committee and Regional Service Commission. 2.4, licenses, permits, and compliance with other bylaws. 2.5, metric measurements. 2.6, zone boundaries. 2.7, zoning bylaw amendments. 2.8, uses permitted. 2.9, interpretation. 2.10, images. 2.11, the use of italics and underlining. 2.12, development permits and fees. 3.0, general provisions. 3.1, permitted uses and requirements. 3.2, number of buildings on a lot. 3.3, existing undersized lots. 3.4, existing buildings. 3.5, non-conforming uses. 3.6, uses permitted in all zones. 3.7, uses prohibited in all zones. 3.8, utilities and infrastructure. 3.9, access to lots. 3.10, mixed uses. 3.11, reduced frontage on a curve. 3.12, line of vision at an intersection. 3.13, accessory buildings or structures erected prior to main building. 3.14, height exceptions. 3.15, prohibition regarding yards and other open spaces. 3.16, building and structure projections, permitted encroachments. 3.17, enclosures for swimming pools. 3.18, power lines over swimming pools. 3.19, finished floor above grade. 3.20, garbage storage. 3.21, fences. 3.22, exterior lighting or illumination devices. 3.23, change of lot by infilling or excavation. 3.24, keeping of livestock and chickens. 3.25, queuing spaces. 3.26, car and bicycle parking requirements. 3.27, parking lot and driveway requirements. 3.28, loading standards. 3.29, mobile vending facilities. 3.30, landscape buffers and landscape areas. 3.31, setback from ordinary high water mark. 3.32, development within the town plan and environs and historic business district. 3.33, licensed premises. 3.34, short-term rentals. 3.35, protection from deer. 3.36, windows in the historic business district. 4.0, residential zones. 4.1, general provisions for all residential zones. 4.1.1, requirement for row housing dwellings. 4.1.2, garages and carports. 4.1.3, uses prohibited in certain yards. 4.1.4, landscaping. 4.1.5, residential development near a lagoon or treatment plant. 4.1.6, portable or temporary garages. 4.1.7, accessory uses, buildings and structures in the residential zone. 4.1.8, home daycares. 4.1.9, home-based businesses. 4.1.10, bed and breakfasts. 4.1.11, boarding houses. 4.1.12, group homes. 4.1.13, standards for apartment dwellings, senior citizens housing and residential care. 4.1.14, amenity space requirements for apartment dwellings, senior citizens housing and residential care facilities. 4.1.15, requirements for two-family dwellings, triplexes and converted dwellings. 4.2, SR serviced residential zone. 4.2.1, SR zone permitted uses. 4.2.2, SR zone uses subject to terms and conditions, bracket conditional uses. 4.2.3, SR zone standards. 4.2.4, accessory building height. 4.2.5, use of front yards. 4.2.6, minimum ground floor area. 4.3, SRC, serviced residential and culture zone. 4.3.1, SRC zone permitted uses. 4.3.2, application of SR zone to SRC zone. 4.4, ER estate residential zone. 4.4.1, ER zone permitted uses. 4.4.2, ER zone uses subject to terms and conditions, bracket conditional uses. 4.4.3, ER zone standards. 4.4.4, accessory building height. 4.4.5, use of front yards. 4.4.6, minimum ground floor area. 4.5, MR1, multiple residential zone. 4.5.1, MR1 zone permitted uses. 4.5.2, converted dwelling units. 4.5.3, MR1 zone standards. 4.5.4, accessory building height. 4.5.5, use of front yards. 4.5.6, minimum floor area. 4.6, MR2, high density multiple residential zone outside town plat and environs. 4.6.1, permitted uses. 4.6.2, MR2 zone standards. 4.6.3, accessory building height. 4.6.4, use of front yards. 4.6.5, minimum floor area. 5.0, commercial zones. 5.1, general provision for all commercial zones. 5.1.1, commercial landscaping and screening requirements. 5.1.2, accessory buildings and structures in the commercial zone. 5.1.3, special requirements for auto-oriented uses and gas bars. 5.2, CC central commercial zone. 5.2.1, CC zone permitted uses. 5.2.2, CC zone uses subject to terms and conditions, bracket conditional uses. 5.2.3, CC zone standards. 5.2.4, use of front yards. 5.3, TC tourist commercial zone. 5.3.1, TC zone permitted uses. 5.3.2, TC zone uses subject to terms and conditions, bracket conditional uses. 5.3.3, TC zone uses subject to a bylaw amendment. 5.3.4, TC zone standards. 5.3.5, side and rear yards adjacent to residential zones. 5.3.6, use of front yards. 5.4, MU mixed use zone. 5.4.1, MU zone permitted uses. 5.4.2 MU zone uses subject to terms and conditions, bracket, conditional uses, bracket. 5.4.3 change of use requiring approval. 5.5.4 MU zone standards. 6.0 institutional zone. 6.1 institutional zone. 6.1.1 institutional zone permitted uses. 6.1.2 institutional zone uses subject to terms and conditions, bracket, conditional uses, bracket. 6.1.3 institutional zone requirements. 6.1.4 screening. 7.0 environmental/recreational uses. 7.1 GS zone. 7.1.1 GS zone permitted uses. 7.1.2 development standards. 7.2 ESA zone. 7.2.1 ESA zone permitted uses. 7.2.2 development standards. 7.3 NI zone. 7.3.1 NI zone permitted uses. 7.3.2 NI zone permitted standards. 7.3.3 use of front yards. 7.3.4 maximum floor area. 7.3.5 trees. 7.3.6 garbage removal. 7.3.7 services. 7.3.8 environmental health considerations. 7.4 SLR overlay zone. 8.0 signage. 8.1 definitions. 8.2 administration. 8.3 signage permits. 8.4 applications and plans. 8.5 signage variances. 8.6 prohibited signs. 8.7 number of signs on residential properties. 8.8 number of signs on commercial properties. 8.9 number of signs in institutional and green space zones. 8.10 sign area calculations. 8.11 general standards for signs. 8.12 standards for specific types of signs. 8.12.1 fascia signs. 8.12.2 freestanding signs. 8.12.3 awnings. 8.12.4 street banners. 8.12.5 non-commercial temporary signs. 8.12.6 projecting or flag signs. 8.12.7 window signs. 8.13 maintenance signs. 8.14 non-conforming existing signs. 8.15 election signs. 8.16 exemptions. 8.17 abandoned and unlawful signs. 8.18 refusal of a sign permit. 8.19 revocation of a sign permit. 9.0 repeal and transition. Schedule A zoning map. Schedule B map of the historic business district, town plot and environs. Schedule C sea level rise SLR overlay zone map. Read for the second time this first day of March 2021. Speechless.
Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison.
Uh,
Hey,
On to the next one. PED 201201, Market Wharf Design Selection. The background: the town of St. Andrews is in the process of identifying the best option to replace the current Market Wharf. Funding is available to help replace the existing wharf structure and make repairs to Market Square. The three options being proposed for the replacement of the approach to the wharf include the rock jetty structure, a concrete structure, and a wooden structure. The town has hosted two public consultation sessions, one January 20th and the other Feb 17th, to allow the public input considerations for the replacement of the wharf. To meet deadlines with the funding partners, council must choose to design to proceed with. So the motion is, and I'll read it with the blank first and we can fill it in. The council selects that's our option, Wharf design option to proceed with the development of engineering and environmental assessments to replace the approach to the Wharf and Market Square. Or can I just throw one out there and then I guess we will have to do it by amendment if people don't like my choice? Because I suppose we can't really talk until we put a motion on the floor, eh?
Yep, exactly.
Your
Go
worship,
for it, Councillor Harrison.
Okay,
your worship, can I make a suggestion that might clarify things a bit? Is that it seems like we have two issues here. One is the approach to the wharf, and the second one is the Market Square. And those are two, they could be two different options. I would suggest breaking this motion into two options for clarity. One is the Market Square. The second one is the approach for the wharf.
I mean, I don't think Market Square changes with any of the other options though, yeah?
I think it's pretty clear cut.
Yeah,
I think it would be helpful to have the two broken out.
I think Mr. Spear, I might get you to comment on that. It occurs to me that the application for funding that we have now received final approval on incorporates both of those issues in terms of the promised funding. So it might not be advisable to split them out, but what's your opinion?
Well, I see where Councillor Grew's coming from. I mean, the assumption from staff all along that Market Square using the Armorstone option was always considered an okay. And so we've always proceeded with that. It really was the approach, as Councillor Grew has said. But the way the motion currently reads, we're saying the Wharf design option to proceed with the development of engineering, blah, 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 is, I guess you could look at it 10 years from now and say, why didn't they go with the, if council chooses an option besides the infill option, and we still go with the infill option for the Market Square, then they could say, well, why weren't you consistent? So by breaking it up, it's just clarifying that if we make an assumption that the infill option is not the option for the approach, then we can say that Armorstone is sufficient for Market Square, and then whatever option council chooses for the approach.
I mean, we could do it if this works, that council selects, and I'll go with concrete to split the difference here. So council selects the concrete structure wharf design option and Armorstone Market Square repair. It's not even an option, that's just the only one on the tables. To proceed with the development of engineering and environmental assessments to replace the approach and Market Square seawall area.
I'll second
And
that.
that,
I like
that
it.
should be sufficient if council's okay with that amendment on the fly there.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, possibly you can make it a bit more, I mean, based in English. And I'm not sure how much sense it made, but you get what I'm saying. That it's the actual approach and wharf that will be the concrete or under this motion. And with Market Square, the seawall or whatever you want to call it, retaining wall, will probably most likely be Armorstone on the along the shoreline, basically.
Yeah.
Yes. That's it. Is everybody happy with that?
Councillor Grew, your worship.
Or Gumashell.
Or, sorry, Councillor Gumashell.
Councilor Michelle here. I'm not especially happy with that amendment. I didn't prepare anything because I've been flip-flopping back and forth on this issue right up until today when I went down to down by the wharf and the tide 6 inches from the top of the edge. We have to keep in mind that this is climate change money. And the climate is definitely changing. The tides are higher, da, 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 da. And I won't ramble too much because I'm running out of gas 3 hours and 20 minutes into this meeting, just like my computer. I will say that when we redid the arena, when we put the fitness center, the wellness center in the arena, a lot of people said, oh, that's not going to work. Da 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 da. You're just fixing up the old bowling alley. And then we brought in some designers from Toss and St. John, and they were able to put together some designs that showed people what was possible. And from that, we were able to have a wellness center that I think everybody's pretty pleased with, and they've done an amazing job. I'm not saying that the Armor Stone is necessarily the best option, but all we have at this late date, and I guess I should have asked sooner, but again, with the flip-flopping, all we have are engineers' depictions of what the Armor Stone would look like. And then we have a whole bunch of letters from people saying, well, that's going to be ugly. I think that maybe the problem is that we're letting the engineers do some of the design when we really need designers to do some of the design. So if we were to go with the rock infill, couldn't we design what would be on top of that? I mean, we have, according to the Cormier report, one of the top 5 tourist attractions in New Brunswick down in our wharf in terms of numbers. And if we were to go with the Armor Stone, and we could add as much as, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but it's probably a third increase in space, usable space that could separate cars from people, have more of a park-like atmosphere, be more of a focal point for the community. Things like Paddle Fest and other events that happen there, we would have more space. It'd be safer. I mean, there's so many reasons why increasing it seemed to be a good idea. If we had other designs for what could go on top of that Armor Stone that would make it look more aesthetically pleasing, i.e. less ugly, I think that we should do that. So if we don't have to decide tonight, we could reach out to a designer and say what could go on top of that Armor Stone so that it's not ugly. Also, the Armor Stone could be sloped like the Armor Stone at the point, could all be uniform in color. There's a lot of different things that I think we could look at before we eliminate that Armor Stone option. The one thing that is a concern with the Armor Stone is how it might change the tides. And we've had a lot of engineers write in and say that it's the currents and the siltation is all going to be affected. So maybe we need to actually have that study in hand if it's such an easy thing to determine. Maybe we should, go out and get that study. So if we don't have to decide tonight, I'd like to make a motion to table it until we have some more design plans. Maybe we have that engineering in hand that says that, we shouldn't be expanding on what is an incredible resource for the town. And, like the economy, the tourism economy wants to thrive. And I think that we can push on that gas pedal by supporting the increase in space and size and safety at the wharf, at the foot of the wharf, maybe even some more bathrooms and whatnot. So I've flip-flopped back and forth on this. I looked at it with my students. Anyway, that's where I'm coming down, is need more information. Thank you.
I think my only problem in terms of saying it's one of our major tourist destinations is just because it is a beautiful harbor. If we just add a bunch of buildings onto a bunch of Armor Stone, I don't know if we're enhancing our harbor. And in fact, in my view, it would be detracting from it. But I don't know. I would hope we're ready to make this vote. I think a lot of the public input has been clear. If not, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 people that have been in favor of the Armor Stone. Like, I'm surprised this is even still on the table for any councillors, to be honest. But it just seems like really a wrong decision for our town to basically build a jetty of land instead of just building a wharf. But in terms of climate change, I think you can build a wharf 2 feet higher. So, or a foot higher, whatever it needs to be. I don't think climate change will be a deciding factor, except in terms of we have to build whatever the structure is to take it into account. But I think all three building materials can be used to be adaptive to climate change. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay,
As someone who's very much in favor of parks and sidewalks, the Armorstone option just, and the increase in space, I'm kind of stuck there. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the best way to go, but I was hoping we could get some more designs, maybe from TOS or somebody like that. We get some designers in so we could have better depictions of what's possible there.
Mr. Spear, could I get you to comment? Back in at the committee meeting and prior to that in the public consultations, I think we talked very clearly about the fact that it isn't insignificant to start studying further each one of the options, that in fact it's terribly expensive to environmental design, all of that stuff is relatively expensive, and we'll be lucky to be able to afford to do it properly for one option. And I thought we were going to just choose one option.
Well, I guess that'd be staff's recommendation, Your Worship, is it is, $50 to $75 to $100,000 for each option to do environmental impact assessments. And so we'll go the way council wishes. If with the successful funding and the completion of the project, it will be paid for by the funding, but on the flip side, it means less money to go into the capital development if we do additional studies. So I guess it's really up to, if council, it's really narrowed it down to one or two and really wants to look at it, it's one thing. But if two of the options aren't being taken seriously, then why throw this money into studies when council wants to follow a particular avenue?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gumichel, are you making a motion to table?
Yes, motion to table.
Your worship, before we go to that motion, can I ask the CEO, at what point, like right now you're looking for a decision so you can get started with this project because you now have the funding in place. And we've been talking and talking and talking. I think at some point we have to make a decision, a go, no go decision, so that staff can get on with the project and actually do the environmental studies that are needed to be done. And because otherwise, if we do a tabling and wait, we could lose the construction season for this year, and or even delay the design even further. So I think that staff has been very patient with us. We have done the public consultations. We have gotten the input. I think we have to make a decision as councillors as to what we're going to do. That's the decision before us tonight.
And I guess to add to that, Your Worship, Councillor Gumichel's options are knowable, but the problem's going to be is our funding is fixed now, right? We've got $5 million, and for total project cost, anything above that we're paying out of pocket. And so even if we go with the Armorstone, it's going to cost what it's going to cost, even if we, but then if we put a shell on top of it, or a facade, if you will, to hide it, it's going to add substantially to the cost. So we just have to keep that in mind, whatever council wants to do. But if it's $300,000 or $500,000 to pretty it up, that's all out of council's pockets, or the taxpayers' pockets.
Okay, in fairness, Councillor Gumichel has put forward a motion to table, so I'll look for a seconder for that motion so we can deal with that motion. I don't see a seconder. Is there a seconder for that motion? If not, sorry, Councillor Gumichel, we can't get a seconder for the motion. So we
Trying.
go back to Councillor Harrison's motion.
Your Worship. Your Worship.
Deputy Mayor? Yep.
Yeah, I guess I'll say my piece is this is obviously a big decision before council. So here we are in our 5th year talking about a legacy project for council. To open up, I think it's important to recognize staff, the amount of work that they've put into this. The first thing that's very obvious is during these times, public consultation isn't as easy as it normally is. We can't have a gathering up at the arena with 3 flip charts that says come up and give input. So the fact that they did the mail outs, they did multiple information sessions, and get that level of engagement speaks to how hard they work, because that's what we asked for. We wanted people to be aware when the funding was getting more realistic. We said the public needs to know about this, and I think staff did a wonderful job. If I recall some of the decisions we've made over the last few years, whether it be the campground, where the wellness center is, the amount of letters that we received on this particular project is right up there. So that's exactly kind of for myself what I needed for the decision-making process. I've had conversations in the community, but you don't talk to everybody, and to get some letters from longtime community members that have really no financial gain from the wharf, but they just have a strong opinion on what we need for our community, it certainly helped. And the other thing is originally we only had one option, and we asked staff to go back and give us multiple options to make a better decision, and staff came back with 3 options that they looked at other communities and other materials. So again, I think that it's important to recognize that this has been a long process for staff, so certainly appreciate it. We've talked about the armor stone. We've talked about the pros and cons of all the options. When you look at the armor stone, no one's going to argue that from a costing perspective, it's not attractive that way. No one's going to argue from an engineering standpoint that it checked the boxes, but when you look at the benefits and cons of the project, and really start looking at the cons, we heard a lot from the public. So I'm not going to go through the benefits and cons, because we've had, I think council's had like 4 or 5 presentations on it, but the things that aren't in that presentation, and staff obviously can't say, is, we talked about the environmental assessment. We're going to need one for whatever our desired option is. But when you look at the armor stone, I think every one of us know that to put armor stone that far out into our bay is going to have impact on tidal currents. There's no way that it can't. I don't know personally the extent to what that will be. I know that the environmental assessment should give us some indication, but I know that area by the wharf is extremely, extremely muddy. And I think that if you alter the current quite a bit, I think you're going to have some pretty serious impacts. And again, I don't know to what extent. I do know that over my course of my term on council, that over the history of the town, every time we've even put in a storm drain, or we've put down anything by the bay, everyone within a block of where we put a storm drain always says that erosion is directly responsible for what the town did. So what I'm wondering is, no matter what the environmental assessment comes back, anybody in that hole within kilometers of this is going to point their finger every time they have erosion and say, it's because you put that armor stone there. So that's going to be an ongoing battle between the town and people that own waterfront property on that whole shoreline if we were to select that option. I know when I look at that drawing of armor stone in the concept, it's perfectly placed. Every rock is put exactly the way it should look. Every rock is the exact same color. There's no debris on it. And when you walk from the blockhouse to the point on the shoreline, there's a lot of different armor stone on that property. And one thing that jets out from it is the armor stone is, some of it's covered in seaweed, some of it has garbage in it. The tide, as it comes up, it stains it different colors. The armor stone is not going to look like it does in that diagram. It's going to be unpredictable, and to be honest, it's not going to be perfect. I worry too that the safety element of it, when you look at that armor stone, you can't help but think of what's going to happen in a storm, and some youth, whether it be a tourist or local, decides that they want to take a video of the storm coming in. I just have kind of a little bit of flashbacks at Peggy's Cove, when people are on the rocks too close to the water and worried about what the impacts could be if someone got swept in there. So there's safety concerns to that model as well. This council has spent hours and hours and hours on guiding documents for our community. I know that I might be oversimplifying it, but the gist of our secondary municipal plan is to follow certain guidelines and best practices to not destroy the heritage of our downtown. And in particular, sometimes the cheapest option isn't necessarily the best option, and we need to protect the look and the feel of our downtown. The Wharf is the main focal point of our downtown. I think that just because the Armor Stone is the cheapest option, I think that if the town was just pursuing the cheapest option, it would be almost hypocritical to our secondary municipal plan. I think we have to live our secondary plan, and I think we need to live our guiding documents that we're expecting the public to follow as well. And I've highlighted a lot of points. I have a lot more, but I'm going to wrap it up because I know other councilors want to speak. I'd like for council to obviously talk about the concrete in the wood structure and drop the Armor Stone. We are here, as we all know, to represent the people of St. Andrews. We've all been doing it for over 4 years. And as I mentioned earlier, staff has done an incredible job of getting public input. And what became abundantly clear through the public input is over 95% of residents felt that the Armor Stone was not the best option for our community. They said that they understand the financial benefits and maybe the engineering benefits, but they're not willing to risk the visual impacts of our downtown. They're not willing to risk the heritage altering implications that this could have. There's unknown environmental impacts that even with an environmental assessment that we may not be able to fully know. This rock pier, if we were to do it, would alter not just our bay, but our downtown and our community forever. You can't reverse this. Like, you really can't. It would cost so much money to haul that all out of there. And at this time, as I hear from people in the public, it became abundantly clear that the people of St. Andrews have said to me that they do not want Armor Stone in their bay downtown. So on that, I don't necessarily, I'm up to having a discussion on wood and concrete, but I think as process of elimination of supporting a motion, we should just get consensus on, eliminating an option so people can talk about their number 2.
Thank you, Dan. Anybody else want to comment? We do have Councillor Harrison has a draft motion. So he's ready to put that forward but if anybody else wants to speak, please do it now.
Your worship?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to say a few words if I may.
Sure.
If you look at the various options and you take away the hyperbole and everything, the Armor Stone option is by far the superior option in terms of engineering, in terms of the width, in terms of its resilience to climate change, in terms of cost and all these things. And as an engineer, if I was going to be picking an option to do, I would certainly be looking very favorably at the Armor Stone. I'm not here to represent my views. I'm here to represent the public. And as the deputy mayor has said, the public has spoken loud and clear. They have indicated that the Armor Stone is not the option that they want. They have and one of those intangibles that engineers sometimes have difficulty with is the aesthetics. And I'm probably in that group as well. But the aesthetics and the heritage value of our town are important. This is a National Historic District. We have to be mindful of that. We have to protect the look and feel of our town. And for that reason, I would concur with the deputy mayor that the Armor Stone does not fit within that definition of protecting the look and feel and looking out for future generations. So I would certainly go for, in my opinion, the concrete is probably the middle of the road option that has a higher life expectancy and protects that look and feel. And then when you look at the capital costs, really at this stage of the game, with the uncertainty of the capital costs, all of the costs are the same, really. There's not much of a difference in terms of capital costs. Where the difference comes in is in the life cycle costs. And one thing that has not been measured in all or discussed in any of these analysis is that in 25 or 30 years, the town will have another opportunity to get additional funding from the federal government or the provincial government to recapitalize this wharf. But I think it's important to cherish what we have in terms of heritage and in terms of the look and feel we have in our town, which I think is one of the reasons why most people came here. So I think that is an important factor that you can't put a price tag on. With regards to staff, I feel for you. Council made a decision back in 2018. Staff have acted on that decision. They acted in good faith, and now council is sort of doing a step back, which is I guess what councils do is we listen to the public, we take into account all the factors, and sometimes we have to do that step back in order to get it right. And this is one of those times where I think, as the deputy mayor has indicated, if we go with a stone jetty, there's no coming back from that. And I think we have to be very careful and preserve the heritage of our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Group.
Your worship. Your worship.
Yes, Councillor Akaji.
Thank you. I agree with the deputy mayor. I don't like the looks of the arbor stone, even though it would, preserve and the width. I like the fact that we need to be aesthetic with our historic town, and what Councillor Grew has said. It needs to fit in with our town. It needs to be the focal point that it has been. And putting a wider point at the front, I don't think is aesthetically pleasing to a lot of the people. I've had many of the, I guess we'll call them the ancients, come forward and say, I played on that as a kid, and I don't think, you should be changing it because I still want to be able to walk down there and, look out to sea and so forth. And I know a lot of people, tourists and visitors that come, and they just like walking on the wharf. So what if it's wider? We have not, touch wood, had an accident where, somebody was run over or whatever. It's, people are very careful on the wharf because they know they have to be, and they're very respective of the wharf. So I don't believe in making that armor stone our #1 priority, whether it's cheaper or not. I think we need to listen to the people of St. Andrews, and they have said they don't want that. They want something that's in line with what they've had. I think it's tradition or historic, whatever you want to call it. But I certainly am not going to go with the armor stone. I would like to see the concrete one go for the fact that, we can put wooden things up the side to make it look like the old wharf, but it would still last longer, and we can raise it higher if we need to because of, sea level rising. But we need to listen to the people of St. Andrews. That's why we were put on this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Akaji. Anybody else? Councillor Group.
Thank you. One final thing I'd just like to add is sometimes as councillors, you get a bit of myopic vision. And I'd just like to thank Councillor Harrison for his wisdom in setting us on the good path. Thank
It
you.
was fun.
All right, look, if I think we're ready to put forward the motion as Councillor Harrison has formulated it. Can you put that motion to us, Councillor Harrison?
Well, I'm wondering if I'll just, even given all we've said, can we just take it that staff knows that, you know what, here, I'll try to rejig it a bit just so we have and it's been 3 hours, so trying to improv here isn't working well. So the motion is that council selects the concrete option for the wharf design, and armor stone to buttress the Market Square seawall / shoreline as our options to proceed with the development of engineering and environmental assessments to replace the approach to Market Wharf and the Market Square seawall shoreline structure.
Okay.
Is that too mangled, or does that work for people?
Oh, Mr. Knopper, you got that?
Yep.
Good. All right.
I
I'll
will
look
second that
for a
motion.
seconder.
I'll second it.
I already
Yep.
seconded it
Oh, somebody
long
else.
ago.
That's
I
right.
seconded
Mr.
it way
Bishop.
back at the pass.
Yep.
So, all
Counselor
right,
Bishop,
all right. I'm taking Counselor Bishop because I heard her first as a seconder. So,
already did.
Counselor Bishop.
Oh,
Worship.
All right,
Your
Your
worship.
worship,
yes,
Just before we vote, I know that we have some designs in front of us, and I think staff would do this anyway, but if the design by chance with what we select looks a lot different than what's in these diagrams, I think I'd like to obviously be aware and revisit it because yeah, just we're approving the material, but I just want to make sure it's everything we expect.
yeah, I think there'll be a lot of consultation with council before as we begin the actual design engineering process. So for sure, we all have a big stake in this, I agree. Okay, we've got a motion, it's been seconded. I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion as read by Councillor Harrison, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Thank you, council. This has been I'm going to say it's been a difficult process because it's been very time consuming and we've had to cope with a lot of input on it, but it's also been the right kind of example of democracy in action as far as I'm concerned. So I think that we've gone about this the right way, and I think council deserves a lot of credit along with our staff to get us to the place that we've gotten to. So onward and upward, we've got $5 million to work with. And I think there's still lots of flexibility in the design so that we make sure we hit the mark of the things that we spoke about tonight. So thank you, council.
your worship.
All right.
Your worship, before we proceed, I do need to note we are 2 hours and 45 minutes into this meeting. At 2 hours and 2.5 hours, I am to warn you that you have to select a motion to continue with the meeting. If not, any discussions at this meeting would be carried on at our next special meeting of council.
Well, council,
I move to continue the meeting.
okay,
I second that motion.
okay. Council, all in favor of continuing the meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll continue. Thank you, Mr. Knopper, for bringing that to our attention.
We're almost done, I think.
No,
Wait.
we should be offering t-shirts to any viewers that are still online here. See who's stuck with us for 3 hours.
Hope it's another 3 hours.
Okay, so
Onward.
here's
Go, Andrew,
here's
go.
here's a triple motion. PED 210202 A, B, and C. Bylaw 21-02 being a bylaw to establish a planning advisory committee for the town of St. Andrews, first reading. Background. Through discussions with the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission, the town of St. Andrews is wanting to establish a planning advisory committee for St. Andrews. Currently, the town operates under the Service Commission's Planning Review and Adjustments Committee. There's a staff report attached. So the first motion will be that council grant leave for first reading of bylaw 21-02 being a bylaw to establish a planning advisory committee for the town of St. Andrews.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Councillor Bishop. Thank you. Comments, council? all had an opportunity to look at this, so I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion is passed. And so I will now read my favorite task. I will now read for first reading. This is bylaw 21-02. Bylaw 21-02 being a bylaw to establish a planning advisory committee for the town of St. Andrews. The council of the town of St. Andrews, under authority vested in it by the Community Planning Act, RSNB 2017, and amendments hereto, hereby makes the following bylaw. Title: 1. This bylaw may be cited as the Town of St. Andrews Planning Advisory Committee bylaw. Advisory Committee established. 2. In accordance with Section 3 of the Community Planning Act 2017, Chapter C-19 and amendments thereto, A planning advisory committee of not less than 5 members and not more than 15 members is hereby established. B, members of the advisory committee shall be appointed and or removed by resolution of council. C, to be a member of the advisory committee, a person shall be I, an eligible voter residing in the town of St. Andrews, semicolon, or II, a member of the council, agent or employee of the municipality, semicolon, but 3, the majority of the advisory committee shall be other than such members, agents, or employees as identified in subsection 2. D, subject to subsection F, the term of office of members of the advisory committee is 3 years, but they are eligible for reappointment. E, the chairman and vice chairman of the advisory committee shall be elected from amongst its membership, and the term of office is 1 year, but they are eligible for reelection. F, council shall designate appointments to the advisory committee so that, as nearly as possible, the terms of office of 1/3 of its members expire on the 1st of January in each year. Duties and powers. 3, the duties and powers of the advisory committee are set out in section 4 of the Community Planning Act 2017, Chapter C-19, and amendments hereto, and read for the first time this first day of March, AD 2021. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. So the next motion is PED 210202B. And it's the motion is the council sets the date of Monday, March 22nd, 2021 at 6:15 p.m. for a public hearing of objections to bylaw 21-02, being a bylaw to establish a planning advisory committee for the town of St. Andrews.
Could I have a seconder for that motion, please?
I'll second it.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Akaji. All in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is passed. And now we move Councillor Harrison to the next motion.
PED 210202B or C. The motion is that council obtain the views of PRAC to bylaw 21-02, being a bylaw to establish a planning advisory committee for the town of St. Andrews.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder for that motion?
Councillor Group.
Sorry.
Yeah, Councillor Group.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Grew, I missed that. Thank you. All in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is also passed.
Okay. My next bundle of motions, there's 2 sets. Am I to understand from what I've seen today, these are being redone into a different format or a different timeline? It's the
So-
Sophia Street.
Yes, so through you, your worship, I can speak to these, especially when it comes to Z 1806. You did receive a letter, and Planner Gopin can speak to this as well. You did receive the correspondence from the planners, lawyers in regards to the process necessary for passing these under the old zoning bylaw. It is actually referenced that we should pass the new zoning bylaw prior to any amendments happening. So these would actually, Z 1806 would actually have to be pulled or tabled and then brought forward after the zoning bylaw is passed. In order to maintain, and council was provided the timeline within the letter from the lawyers, in order to maintain Z8, the 108 Sophia Street and the 152 Water Street proposal that's optioned for you, council. We would have to move the zoning bylaw to third reading on March 15th in order to be able to start the processes on those two properties to make it within your mandate. Xander, if you want to step in and speak to any of that, I'd appreciate it.
Yep. So that's correct up to this point. The only other thing I'll add is it's really good we did speak with our lawyer, because we thought we could do this like we did a process before, and actually it turns out we have to do it a little bit differently. So Paul spoke to the zoning bylaw amendments. Now we do also have to amend the municipal plan. Good news is you passed that in December, so there's no numbering issues with that. But that process takes a little bit longer. And so assuming you still want to move ahead with 108 Sophia, what needs to happen tonight, and I think you can just amend one of on MP20-03, instead of a public hearing of objections, there needs to be a public presentation, and that's just Community Planning Act language. And that will be on March 15th, because that needs to happen within 14 days of when that's announced, which would be today. So the municipal plan amendment gets started before the zoning bylaw amendments. As soon as Z2101 is passed, you start the zoning bylaw amendments, and Paul and I have worked together for this timeline so that they will move into lockstep at a certain point, and they can both be passed within the 90 days that you need to for that sale, and also within council's mandate.
Okay, good. So tonight, we're essentially tabling all but the motion, the amended motion to have a public presentation, correct?
Yeah, public
okay.
presentation on March 15th instead of a public hearing on March 22nd for MP20-03.
Okay, so Councillor Harrison, can you bring forward that amended motion, and then we'll table the others?
Your worship.
So just so I'm just looking through my list here.
Your worship.
Your worship, Councillor Grew wanted to speak.
Yeah, Councillor Grew.
Yeah, thank you, your worship. This is an awkward one, because I would suggest that through no fault of its own, we had all the best of intentions as council, but I would suggest right now the town is in a bit of a conflict of interest situation, because we have sold the property at 108 Sophia Street on a condition that it's rezoned to mixed use. So this creates the appearance that the notice of objections for the zoning bylaw and the notice of objections for the municipal plan change, it doesn't matter what the public says, because we've already made the decision on this matter. And in my mind, we're supposed to be, as a council, impartial when it comes to these kind of matters. And we're supposed to be listening to the public and not making decisions in advance of the public hearings. So based on this, I would suggest that, and this is difficult for me to say, but I would suggest that a reasonable course of action would be to table this whole matter on 108 Sophia and defer it to the next council so that they can amend the zoning bylaw and the municipal plan in impartial public meetings. Because right now, we have already made the decision. So I think it means about a 2 to 3 month delay, but it would give the right perception to the public that the notice of objection is matters, and that they have a say. We've already, unfortunately, we've already made the decision. And I really hate this because I'm a dog owner and I really want to have this company come to town. But we've already predisposed and made that decision. So I'll just throw that out there, and I don't know if it's going to make a difference, but maybe the planner can sort of add some light or.
All I can say to that is technically the application was made by the prospective property owners for the rezoning, not by town administration. So from a technical standpoint, technically the town is not applying for this, but I do see the logic of what you're saying, Councillor Group. From a Community Planning Act standpoint, from a zoning bylaw standpoint, you're fine. But I think that's kind of up to council what they want to do in that
I think it's
regard.
more from an ethical point of view right now. And from a, I guess, an optics point of view, it doesn't feel right.
Can we sell it as a non-conforming use that's already there? Because the thing was a medical center for the last 50 years. All we're doing is switching the patient. Now it's Fifi instead of Fred. I mean, it really doesn't seem like much of a change in use, to be quite honest. In fact, as opposed to not in the theory that we had it zoned improperly for 50 years. But in fact, it was used as a medical center for 50 years.
Your worship, if I may.
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chair.
Well, Councillor Grew brings up a good point. I guess no matter who goes there, except for a residential purpose, the council's then, under his philosophy, we're always going to be having to follow what's there right now. So we can't do anything with that property because we're the co-owners of it, or we're the owners of it, so it's zone residential, likely by mistake. And, but it's got to stay there because no matter what the town does in the future, we got to make the decision on it while trying to sell the property. So I think it's fair to say that this council can still go through the process. And if there's a large public outcry, then they cannot fulfill it. And then their conditions of sale haven't been met, and then it can be flipped into another thing. But the future council is going to fall under the same problem unless there's someone who comes in and wants to use it as specifically as a home. To be honest, even if multiple use apartments that have to be rezoned into MR1 or MR2, we're going to be in the same dilemma. We're the seller trying to sell land, and then we got to rezone it in order to make the sale happen. So I think we're just, as landowners, we're going to be caught in this conundrum occasionally when we're disposing of property.
If I could, your worship.
Yes.
I kind of look back on a previous motion that we've had is around the Passamaquoddy Lodge. We want to award it to them for a lodge, but yet that would still have to go through a zoning process. So the people that are engaged in that already don't have a say because we already said it was used for that purpose. So it's not an isolated type motion, but I agree. I think we start the process, and if we have a lot of public outcry, then great. But if we don't have any, which I would think would not, because it's pretty much the exact, the Fifi versus Fred might be one of my favorite quotes that I've had on council that I've heard. But technically speaking, everybody that lives there is used to it being that similar type of purpose.
Yeah, I'm kind of in favor of going to the public presentation and see how many people come and say, great idea, and how many come and say, what a terrible idea, you should do something else, right? And I kind of thought that we were just perhaps taking a little bit of license here, but we're putting in another professional service that we don't now have in our community, which also attracts people to our community. I mean,
Yeah, I think we did all the right things. It's just we find ourselves in a bit of a dilemma, ethical dilemma right now.
Well, we've been there before, Councilor Drew. I can think of ethical dilemmas we've been in that are worse than this one.
Yeah.
Besides, I'm anxious to have something there where the
Yeah.
clients can walk to their
I
appointment.
hear you.
Let's do a public meeting. Then we'll know if everyone likes it or everyone hates it.
Right.
You may not
So I-
get any feedback whatsoever, and then, that sort of clears our conscience a little bit.
All
We'll
right.
just put it at the end of a 4-hour meeting. I think the motion I'm going to read is, so I move that council sets the date of Monday, March 15th, 2021 at 6:45? No? Is that correct?
No, that third motion is going to be scrapped because of the zoning. So I think it's that council sets the date of Monday, March the 22nd at 6:30 via electronic meeting for a public public presentation of bylaw, the municipal plan. Is that right?
MP20-03, March 15th. So that's March 15th for the public
Yes,
presentation
March
of MP20-03.
March 15th, what time do we want it though? The original 210204C had 6:45.
6:30.
6:30. 6:30.
Okay, so the council sets the date of Monday, March 15th, 2021 at 6:30 by electronic meeting for a public for a public presentation for bylaw number MP20-03, a bylaw to amend MP20-01 being the municipal plan bylaw for the town of St. Andrews.
Excellent.
Okay, can I have a seconder for that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
So and
opposed?
that's all we can do tonight?
I think so, yeah. And Mr.
Yeah.
Knopper, just a technical question. Those other motions, we're intending to amend those motions, not amend the motion. So we're not really tabling the exact motion. We're withdrawing the motions in order to rewrite them.
Your worship, I would recommend at least having a motion to withdraw the 3 motions for Z1806,
Okay,
just to keep a clerical
Exactly.
purpose for it.
alrighty, okay. I was getting
Okay,
So moved.
I move to withdraw, here, wait, let me find it here. It's planning advisory. So I guess I move to withdraw motions 210203 A, B, and C in relation to the amendment to bylaw Z18-06 for 18108 Sophia Street.
Okay, can I have a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilor Groove. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is passed.
Now, likewise, should I withdraw the 210204 A, B, and C? Or A and B at least?
A and B.
Okay, I
Because you
move
want
to
this.
withdraw PED 210204 A and B, which was the amendment to bylaw MP 20-03 for 108 Sophia Street.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Does that take us to?
And we didn't have any motions planned for 152 water?
We
wanted to
did.
have discussions with council tonight to see if you entertain them because they weren't brought up to you last meeting.
Great.
Okay, no, I'm good with that.
Okay, so we're,
New business.
And,
yeah, we're
well,
in new business.
actually, I think we got ahead of ourselves here, council, but maybe it's too late. Because I thought we said we could do the municipal plan amendment could be done, could it not, Xander? So we probably shouldn't have withdrawn those ones on night, Sophia.
Did,
Well, the only one you need to do tonight is to set the date for the public presentation. You might be able to bring back those motions as they are, but I think it'll be a different date for the public hearing, and you'll have to wait to ask for views. So you basically will have to bring them back as new motions anyways.
yeah, we did withdraw those.
But we did set up the presentation.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Your worship,
Yes,
it's pushing 10 o'clock. Could we perhaps move on to question period and adjourn the meeting?
Mr. We've got the new business. What,
There's a deputy mayor.
Through your worship, Council Grua actually, I think is asking to end the meeting. If he wants, it's fine, but I'm hoping that this motion can be very quick, the one that I read in the setting the agenda. You want me to proceed, your worship?
yes, yeah, I think so. Let's push through.
So there's no background because it was just added in, but everyone's familiar with the background. The motion is moved that council supports the town pursuing development opportunities on land located directly behind the NBCC St. Andrews for affordable housing. Nice and broad and easy.
Second.
Second it.
Seconded by Councilor Gou Michelle.
Thank you, Councilor Michelle. Okay. Council,
Question,
any comments, or do you want me to just call the question here?
question.
We did get a briefing on this, so we're aware of what's going on. So all in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, council. That motion goes forward, and staff can now move forward with that. New business, can we do, are these two, it seems to me that the second thing, the rezoning of 152 Water Street could be, that's just bringing us up to speed, Mr. Spear, and then, and the ice extension thing seems to have some priority. Can we deal with that quickly?
Yeah, the ice extension thing, council does have priority, unfortunately. So what's happened is we're moving to yellow phase at March the 7th. And at that time, hockey is our team sports are allowed to compete against other teams within their zone, I think it is. And so minor hockey has requested that we extend the ice time from March the 14th up to March the 28th. So add 2 weeks so we can get some games in. Now, what I can tell you is that revenue is already down $30,000 this year because of the loss of ice. We pick up about an extra $3,500 in revenue just from minor hockey. We might pick up some extra from others, but power for that period is going to be $6,500. So we're still going to cause a loss of $3,000. The other thing is that's vitally important though is that it will put a lot of our staff behind by 2 weeks, which doesn't sound like a lot, but going into the spring and mowing season, it will. That it takes 2 or 3 weeks to decommission the arena and things. So if we don't do that towards the end of April, then we're going to be rolling into, towards the end of March, we're going to be rolling into the 3rd and 4th week of April before we can release the arena crew out into the public works. And part of the budget process last year, we eliminated a couple of the seasonal positions because we thought of COVID-19 and tried to maintain the budgets. So I just need direction on what council would like to do. There is this, because the Blacks Harbor Arena has closed. They shut down operations at the end of February. And so if these kids from Charlotte County want to play, they're going to have to play more than likely in the St. John region because of the lack of ice currently available. St. Stephen's pretty much booked up. So I'm just looking for direction from council, what you'd like to do with this request.
Your worship, through you,
Yep.
I'd like to, if the CAO could figure out a way to keep the arena open, yet get the public works, maybe pick up a couple part-timers for a little bit. But I think I think it's important to fluff up the hockey season for next year. I mean, kids are pretty upset that they missed out, and it'll help drive next year. You gotta fertilize that interest, and maybe I realize it puts staff behind, but maybe they can figure out a way to. The CAO can figure it out. I'm sure we should try to keep the rink open.
I concur with that. Thank you.
Your worship, the deputy mayor.
Yeah, are we anticipating, that fund that we were able to apply for COVID relief? Are we anticipating that fund to return, or is that a one and done?
At this point, all our knowledge is it's a one and done. But time will tell, but it's primarily sponsored, although it came from the province, it was primarily sponsored by the government of Canada. It was just a redistribution of their funding. So maybe they'll come up with something in a future budget, but right now there's no extension that I'm aware of.
And just
is that even one of the things that we qualified for, that we got funding for? I don't know, was it, Chris?
What's that?
I said, was the loss of ice time something
Yeah.
we actually got compensation for?
That we did, yes.
You did, okay, good.
Up until December.
Through your worship, just took my follow-up is, you got a feel for the youth that just didn't have the opportunities that we all had hoped they had this winter. It's got to be tough on them, just practicing for an entire year and then so close to yellow, and then we shut it down on them. But with that being said, I completely understand there's other things that the town needs. We're already running a significant loss by keeping that arena open as far as we did. So I think council would love to see it open, but I also respect staff and some of the things that they need to get on the plate, where I'm comfortable enough saying that it's a staff decision.
Well, it's one of those things, if you look at hockey as something you make money at, you're looking through the wrong lens, because we lose money on providing ice time every year. It's not about making money, it's about creating recreational opportunities for youth. That's so we're just losing a little more money than we usually use.
I think it's really important in COVID restriction times that we have something for the young people to do.
Okay, Mr. Spear, did that give you some flavor for?
Yeah, we'll try to make it work. I'll let the hockey teams know, and then council's okay. I'll play with budgets a little bit and see if we can pick up some temporary people to keep us moving forward.
And let's hope they don't flip-flop on us again in 2 weeks. We have no control over that, but okay.
And the last question, council, just since it's there, we're not going to get into details, but we've had a real quick question of 152 Water Street, and that area that Mrs. Leggett wanted to rezone along. Quick question: will you guys entertain that? Do you want us to put it together in a future package, or where it hasn't shown up till this late in the game that you won't even want to look at it?
Did they have a time frame at all for when they, like, if all went well, or? I mean, I guess it could be the first thing on the new council's desk.
Yeah, it's a residential property is their primary concern, that they want to build I think, Xander, that they wanted to build the residential property in the back half, the residential facility in the back half, and then so they're not as restricted as if they were trying to build a commercial property to catch the traffic for the summer. The only thing is everybody knows it's hard to get contractors, so if we delay them too long, they might be into 2022 before they get anything built. But we advised them. They were supposed to have returned stuff to us by early February, and they just got it to us about a week ago, so we knew it'd be close. The only other option is we can put it before you with a complete package, and you can review it in a future meeting and decide if you want to continue with it or not.
Through your worship, did I read that the proposed is second and third reading at the same meeting? No.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's what I thought I read. It just just this council's done a good job of not doing that, pushing things through that way. So I'm hoping that we can go out the same way. And maybe I read that wrong.
Your
was-
worship,
It says,
It was 353 pages.
Your worship, I will be providing council an updated version of your timeline for the next 2 months, and it'll stipulate that there won't be a second and third reading or 2 readings in one if we proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Knopper.
Is this
it
a
says
spot
here that
rezoning?
a special meeting could be held to do that, so you don't have to do 2 readings in one night.
Okay. Sorry.
The,
A spot rezoning by chance?
Kind of. Because
Yeah, so I mean, just to basically, it's the rear portion of a lot on Water Street, so it wouldn't front onto Water Street. I think it's even possible they could have, because the central commercial zone does allow for secondary residential uses. If it's not fronting on Water Street, it's possible they could, I'd have to look more into this. We hadn't considered it. There's a possibility they could proceed the residential portion without a rezoning in the central commercial zone. It wouldn't require a municipal plan amendment because the mixed use is a commercial designation. Yep, thank you. Been going for 4 hours, so just like the rest of you. So it could run on the same timeline as the rezoning portion of 10805. You could have the meetings at the same point. All the readings could happen at the same time. But so there's certainly time, but not much, if that makes sense.
okay, Mr. Spear, I like your suggestion, or Mr. Knopper's suggestion, you're gonna put something in front of us quickly that lays that out.
Yeah, no, we'll get something together, maybe even outside of a council package, so we can review it, and then we'll discuss it next time we meet to see if you want to continue with it.
Okay. Let's do that. All right. Look. Mr. Knopper, I think it's time for question period if there's anybody who lasted.
Through you, your worship, I had received questions from the public. However, I did receive emails saying the meeting is taking long and that to refrain from providing the questions so we can proceed on. CAO Spear, I don't know if you want to just wait till next meeting for closed session.
That's fine, yeah.
Then your worship, you can go to adjournment
Yay.
or council
Motion
comments
to
if you want.
adjourn, Councillor Akaji.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Akaji, and a seconder, and we're all in favor, I'm
I'll
sure.
second it.
This must be a new world's record, eh?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
422.
Oh, that's terrible.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Like
Right, everybody.
Right.
Night.